Part 12. Hua Changyan's expression immediately became extremely solemn when she heard this. She instantly stood up straight and vowed, "Don't worry, Lord Venerable. If I had really done those things, I will end myself without Lord Venerable's help." Actually, Hua Changyan was not the kind of person who was afraid of death. If she encountered a situation where she would definitely die, she wouldn't be afraid of blood and death. She could die, but she could not die with the infamy of betraying the Taoist temple by killing her master. Wang Yi nodded slightly. At the same time, he was even more certain that there was something else going on. After all, even with his terrifying perception, he couldn't sense any traces of Hua Changyan lying. At this moment, Su Xia rolled her eyes at Wang Yi. Then, she took Hua Changyan's hand and said with a smile, "Don't let Yi scare you. Just stay here in peace. Stay as long as you want." Wang Yi shook his head slightly when he saw this. He could not help but feel a little helpless. He thought to himself that Su Xia was a classic example of someone who followed her five senses. Seeing that Hua Changyan was weak and beautiful, Su Xia probably felt that she was not a bad person. Tap, tap, tap. At that moment, there was a series of knocks on the front door of the villa. Wang Yi turned around when he heard the commotion and saw Fang Yuan standing outside the door with Fang Mings and Tang Zhenyu. There was no need to even think about it. It was definitely because of Shu Liancheng that the three of them had rushed over immediately. After all, Wang Yi had not informed anyone of his return. Furthermore, his strength made it impossible for anyone to discover him. Wang Yi seemed to be in a good mood. He waved at the three of them and said with a smile, "Don't just stand there. Come in." The three of them hurriedly walked into the courtyard when they heard that. Fang Yuan's gaze swept across the dozens of people who had fainted on the ground and could not help but feel a little frightened. It could be said that none of these people were weak. There were more than 10 Grand Master Realm experts, and there were also several people who were at the same level as him. There was even a top Grand Master Realm expert present. When they arrived, the three of them bowed in unison and said, "Greetings, sir and madam." Wang Yi nodded slightly, indicating that there was no need to be so polite. Su Xia was familiar with them and warmly invited them into the house. In the hall, everyone sat down. Su Xia skillfully took out some tea leaves and spiritual spring water and prepared to make tea for everyone. Hua Changyan blended in quite quickly and started working beside Su Xia. Meanwhile, Fang Yuan and the others could not help but be speechless as they watched Hua Changyan busying herself. Of course, they recognized this genius who had been expelled by the Tianzuo Taoist temple and was wanted by them. They were also very curious. What relationship did this person share with Wang Yi? However, when their gazes swept across Hua Changyan's curvaceous figure and her peerless beauty, they already had a faint guess in their hearts. If it was really as they had guessed, and Hua Changyan was lucky enough to catch Wang Yi's eye, even if she was charged with killing her master, no one would be able to do anything to her. After all, the one who died was only a Grand Master. No one would find trouble with a venerable for someone who was already dead. As long as Wang Yi was willing to pay a small price, or even if he did not have to pay any price at all, he would be able to erase all the sins and responsibilities of Hua Changyan. However, if that was really the case, their impression of Wang Yi would inevitably worsen. Of course, this was only their own guess. Only the people involved knew the exact situation. However, they were certain of one thing. In the current situation, those martial artists who had come for the Tianzuo Taoist temple's bounty would probably return in disappointment. No one in the entire Langya domain could touch Hua Changyan, let alone the experts gathered in Kang City. Of course, Wang Yi saw the abnormality in everyone's expressions and the confusion in their eyes. He also knew what they were worried about. Before they could speak, he pointed at Hua Changyan. Then, he said calmly, "There's still something fishy about her killing her master and betraying the Taoist temple. We need to investigate it carefully. Of course, if she really did such a treasonous thing, she will be dealt with according to the law. I will never stop the authorities from doing so." Fang Yuan heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. They were really afraid that Wang Yi would disregard the law for the sake of beauty, even though he did have the right to be above everything. However, since Wang Yi said that there was something hidden behind this matter, the meaning was different. This meant that a venerable was trying to overturn the case for Hua Changyan. As long as news of this matter spread, the guardian of Tianzuo City and all the ordinary students in the Taoist temple would definitely take it seriously and re-examine the case of Hua Changyan killing her master. Fortunately, Wang Yi also promised that he would absolutely not cover up for Hua Changyan. This prevented anyone from distorting the facts and falsifying evidence to overturn the case in an attempt to please the venerable. After all, the crime of deceiving a venerable was not small. If someone were to suck up to a venerable with this method, it would not be worth it. Fang Yuan and the other two looked at Hua Changyan again and could not help but think. They did not believe that this person had nothing to do with Wang Yi. After all, no matter how talented or bewitching she was, this was only in the eyes of ordinary people. Even before she was wanted, she was not qualified to come into contact with a venerable with her identity and status, let alone have a venerable vouch for her and overturn the case for her. In the end, if he could really prove that Hua Changyan was indeed wronged, she might become the wife of a venerable in the future. Although she was definitely not the first wife, her status would be really high and noble. Of course, Wang Yi did not know what the three of them were thinking. Otherwise, he would definitely have used his scolding skills from his previous life to let them know what the consequences of wrongly accusing someone were. His willingness to help Hua Changyan was actually very simple. First, it was because of Su Xia's attitude. Second, it was very likely that Hua Changyan had been wrongly accused. With her talent, it would indeed be a pity if she died. Wang Yi dared to swear that he was definitely not willing to take action because he was after her beauty. No matter what Fang Yuan and the other two were thinking, after hearing Wang Yi's words, they replied respectfully, "Sir, don't worry. I will definitely convey your will to the guardian of Tianzhuo City later." It had to be said that this was all thanks to Wang Yi's Skynet system that the communication between the giant cities became extremely easy. Wang Yi nodded slightly, tacitly agreeing to Fang Yuan's suggestion. He had some impression of the guardian of Tianzhuo City. He seemed to be a Grandmaster realm powerhouse who had just entered Rank 9. Previously, when he was recasting the weapons for the Grandmasters in Langya County City's treasure vault, it seemed like this guardian of Tianzhuo City was present. Wang Yi believed that as long as the guardian knew that this was his intention, the guardian would definitely do his best. Meanwhile, Hua Changyan could no longer find any words to describe her current mood. She was speechless for a long time and could only bow deeply to Wang Yi. The brewed tea was placed on the coffee table. Then, Su Xia pulled Hua Changyan to sit down with her. They looked like close sisters who had not seen each other for a long time. However, their intimate actions confirmed Fang Yuan and the other two's guesses. The wife of the venerable had already expressed her attitude towards Hua Changyan. Was this person still far from marrying into the Wang family? Wang Yi picked up his tea and took a sip. Then, he placed the teacup on the coffee table before speaking again. Those people in the courtyard were concerned about my family's sign, so they were knocked unconscious and left there by Little Silver. You can take them with you when you go back. You can deal with them according to the laws of Kang City. Upon hearing this, Fang Yuan and the other two immediately understood why so many experts had fainted in the courtyard. At the same time, the three of them mourned for the experts lying in the courtyard. Of all people, why did they have to think about taking the things of a venerable? However, these people were considered lucky. Wang Yi did not intend to kill them. He only wanted them to be dealt with according to the law. Otherwise, it would be normal for them to be killed on the spot for attempting to steal the Lord Venerable's things. No one would be able to say anything even if that happened. After Fang Yuan agreed, Wang Yi's gaze was already on Fang Ming's. Fang Ming's aura was thick and powerful, but there were some fluctuations. He was unable to completely control the power around him. Fang Ming's current state naturally could not be hidden from Wang Yi's eyes. It was obvious that he had just broken through to level 2 of the Dragon Elephant Wisdom technique. Seeing this, Wang Yi couldn't help but praise him. Not bad, not bad. You're quite diligent. In just a few days, you've already broken through to level 2. However, you still have to remember not to be rash in your daily cultivation. Otherwise, you might damage your foundation. To be honest, Wang Yi was also very surprised. According to his calculations, even if Fang Ming's broke through, it would take at least a month. Furthermore, this was under the circumstances that everything was going smoothly. If anything unexpected happened, the timing would have to be pushed back. However, to everyone's surprise, not only did Fang Ming's not reach a bottleneck, but he also directly shortened the time needed for a breakthrough by several times. It had to be said that Fang Ming's was indeed a rare martial arts genius. Upon hearing Wang Yi's praise, Fang Ming's was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Thank you for your guidance, Sir Wang. I will definitely remember it." Wang Yi nodded slightly. At this moment, He saw Fang Yuan struggling to speak. Wang Yi did not know what was wrong with the other party, but he could not be bothered to guess. He simply said, "If you have any difficulties, just say it. There's no need to worry." Fang Yuan naturally knew that Wang Yi had seen his conflicted expression just now. He could not help but feel a little awkward. However, this matter could not be resolved unless Wang Yi stepped in. After pondering for a moment, Fang Yuan no longer hesitated and said directly, "Thankfully, Sir Wang, you're back. Otherwise, this matter would really be difficult." When Wang Yi heard this, his interest was suddenly piqued. What exactly was it that he had to be present to resolve? Fang Yuan continued, "Too many experts have gathered in Kang City now. There is no lack of Grandmaster Realm and even top Grandmaster Realm experts. It's naturally difficult to manage the situation when there are too many experts gathered. It's also easier for there to be conflicts between martial artists. Ordinary people might be implicated. With the current strength of the Guardian's residence, we definitely can't take care of the entire Kang City. Please forgive me for taking the liberty to ask Sir Wang to show up and intimidate those foreign experts." Wang Yi could not help but feel a little embarrassed. It turned out that most of Fang Yuan's worries were because of him. He had no reason to refuse this request, whether it was for public or private reasons. Without hesitation, Wang Yi replied straightforwardly, "This matter is easy to handle." With that, Wang Yi suddenly thought of the venerable order that Zhao Tianlin had brought with him when he arrived in Kang City that day. That thing was indeed useful. There was no need for him to personally appear. As long as he branded a wisp of his will on it, he could easily suppress martial artists who were still in the 9-rank system. Even if other Connate Realm experts saw him, they would more or less give him some face. It would be rare to see someone like Wang Yi, who had rolled up his sleeves and rushed forward in a fit of anger back then. At the thought of this, Wang Yi suddenly smiled mysteriously. He spoke briefly and waited for a moment before disappearing into the hall. Just as everyone was still confused about what he was up to, Wang Yi appeared in the hall again. At the same time, he brought a few pieces of zan paper, an inkstone, and a brush. This was something that the previous owner of the villa had left behind. Wang Yi had found it in the study room when he was free. It seemed that the other party was also someone who liked to do calligraphy. Before anyone could ask, Wang Yi placed 3 pieces of paper on the coffee table. Then, he ground the inkstone and covered his brush in ink. After that, his movements were as smooth as water. Ignoring everyone's puzzled gazes, Wang Yi held the brush in his right hand. The tip of the brush moved like a dragon on the paper. "Stop it." In an instant, 2 large words appeared on the paper. Wang Yi did not stop at all. He wrote the words, "Stop it," on the other pieces of paper. Then, he left his will imprint on each piece of paper. After doing all of this, Wang Yi casually placed the brush aside and gently pushed a few pieces of paper toward Fang Yuan. Then, he smiled and said, "These 3 pieces can be considered my venerable order. If anyone dares to cause trouble in Kang City and affect the ordinary people, you can naturally use this to suppress them. As for my existence, don't publicize it. When the time comes, people might come to my door every day and I won't be able to beat or scold them. My peace and quiet will be disturbed for nothing." Fang Yuan naturally agreed when he heard this. Then, he excitedly put away the venerable orders that Wang Yi had personally written. Perhaps others did not know how precious this thing was, but as the guardian of a city, Fang Yuan knew how significant this thing was. The venerable order had the terrifying power to easily suppress beings in the 9-rank system. Even if it did not have any power, it represented the will and dignity of a venerable. If anyone dared to disobey, it would be equivalent to directly provoking the venerable. The punishment was no less than the death penalty for betraying the race. Such serious consequences were not something ordinary people could bear. Moreover, Wang Yi's meaning was very obvious. It was completely reflected in the venerable order. "Stop it." These 2 words represented that Wang Yi did not want any more disputes in Kang City. No, to put it more strictly, Wang Yi did not allow disputes in Kang City. This was not a discussion, let alone an expectation. This was the first decree issued by Wang Yi, who was a venerable. Anyone who dared to disobey him would definitely suffer his wrath. After Fang Yuan put away the venerable orders, the few of them chatted for a while. However, most of the time, it was Wang Yi who spoke while they listened. After all, with Wang Yi's current level, even if he revealed anything from between his fingers, it would be enough for them to enjoy for the rest of their lives. Furthermore, Wang Yi had also answered some of their cultivation questions and provided them with some insights. Not everyone was qualified to enjoy such treatment. If news of this were to spread, many powerful martial artists would be very envious. Time passed quickly. While everyone was still immersed in their comprehension of the martial Tao, it was already time for dinner. Since they had rushed here, Wang Yi naturally did not have the habit of chasing them out. He personally cooked a table full of delicacies to entertain them. Fang Yuan and the others had been craving Wang Yi's culinary skills for a long time. It was naturally impossible for them to reject such an invitation. This meal could be considered a feast for both the host and guests. After tasting the first mouthful of food, Hua Changyan completely ignored her image and joined the team of 3 Teoties. After they patted their stomachs and leaned lazily on the sofa, the entire dining table was left in a mess. Since he had nothing to do, Wang Yi explained his cultivation experience to everyone and taught them some offensive methods. Fang Yuan and the other 2 could be said to have returned happily. Whether it was the venerable order written by Wang Yi himself, Wang Yi answering their questions personally, or enjoying Wang Yi's cooking, these were all great opportunities that ordinary people did not even dare to think about. Fang Yuan and the other 2, who had gained a lot, were naturally embarrassed to disturb Wang Yi anymore. After sending someone to take away the unconscious martial artists in the courtyard, they quickly bid farewell and left. However, before he left, Fang Ming said that he would visit again in a few days. Wang Yi naturally knew what he was thinking, but he did not mind and nodded in agreement. After Fang Yuan and the other 2 left, Hua Changyan took the initiative to help clean up. When she saw the mess on the table, her face turned slightly red. It was obvious that Hua Changyan had never done such work before in her daily life. Her movements seemed very rusty and clumsy. At noon, countless city guards in black armor suddenly appeared in the streets and alleys of Kang City. Each of them was holding a gong. The soldiers of the City Protection Army slammed the gong hard and shouted at the same time, "Fellow martial artists, we are under the orders of the Guardian, Fang Yuan. We invite you to gather outside the Guardian's residence tomorrow at noon. At that time, there will be a venerable order." The gong continuously reverberated and the shouts did not stop. The soldiers of the City Protection Army didn't miss any corner of Kang City and directly spread the news that Fang Yuan was going to read the venerable order tomorrow. Although there were many martial artists in Kang City who were stronger than Fang Yuan, since he dared to do this, it meant that he was not afraid that those martial artists from foreign cities would not come tomorrow. Actually, it did not matter even if no one came tomorrow. All he needed to do was to read out the venerable order that Wang Yi had written down. If someone dared to use force in the city again, it would be useless no matter what their status was. Fang Yuan did not need to be polite at all. He could just forcefully suppress them with the venerable order. After all, he had already read the venerable order. No matter how noble the person who committed the crime was, they would not be nobler than a venerable realm being. It was as if cold water had entered a boiling pot of oil, instantly igniting the already tense situation in Kang City. At this moment, countless experts were gathered in the giant city. All the voices and topics revolved around the sudden appearance of the venerable order. Near the center of Kang City, in a tea house closest to the Guardian's residence, several terrifying beings with powerful auras occupied the private room on the top floor of the tea house. Through the open window, they looked at the main entrance of the Guardian's residence. In the private room, a burly man with a rough beard and 2 axes on his back was tapping his fingers on the table. He suddenly spoke calmly. According to the statistics from below, no envoys have been sent to Langya County City, and no one from the Guardian's residence has gone to Langya County City. Everyone, do you know what Fang Yuan is up to? Is the so-called venerable order real? Will it affect our plan? Although his voice was flat, it could not disguise the contempt and disdain in his words. It was as if he did not care about Fang Yuan, who was a rank 8 Grand Master. The only thing he cared about and feared was the venerable order whose authenticity had not been confirmed. As soon as he finished speaking, the private room fell into a short silence. After a while, someone said, "Master Wu Qing, I think the venerable order should be real. First, there's no need for Fang Yuan to fake it. Second, Fang Yuan doesn't have the guts to fake it. After all, this crime is not light. It's far from what Fang Yuan can bear. As for whether it will affect our plan, I'm too stupid to judge." The burly man called Lord Wu Qing nodded slightly when he heard this. Then, he swept his gaze across the remaining few people and asked again, "Does anyone have anything to add?" At this moment, a skinny old man with a goatee who looked like a villainous advisor suddenly said with a smile, "Lord Wuqing, don't worry too much." Lord Wuqing couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he heard this. However, he seemed to trust this thin old man very much. He smiled and said, "I think Elder Wu knows what to do, right?" When the thin old man heard this, he stroked his goatee as if everything was under control. He also smiled and said, "It's just some guesses of mine. The venerable order in Fang Yuan's hand is indeed real, but it doesn't come from Langya County City. If I'm not wrong, Fang Yuan should be acquainted with the mysterious venerable who caused a commotion a while ago. And this so-called venerable order must have been obtained by Fang Yuan from that mysterious venerable." The others could not help but nod when they heard this. They all agreed with what the skinny old man said. Lord Wuqing frowned slightly and asked in confusion, "Senior Wu, how can you be sure that this venerable order was not given by that mysterious venerable but requested by Fang Yuan?" When the skinny old man heard this, he immediately laughed and said, "Lord Wuqing, you're right. This is also why I said that you don't have to worry about this matter." Lord Wuqing was also interested at this moment. He couldn't help but say, "Elder Wu, please speak. I'm all ears." The skinny old man did not beat around the bush and directly said, "There are quite a number of experts gathered in Kang City now. It's normal for conflicts to break out between martial artists. It's inevitable that it will affect ordinary people. Fang Yuan is indeed not weak. He has already broken through to rank 8 of the Grandmaster realm. However, it's no different from a fool's dream to use his strength to suppress the martial artists gathered in Kang City. What Fang Yuan can and must do is to beg that mysterious venerable to give him a venerable order to restrict the conflicts between martial artists from affecting ordinary people." Fortunately, Fang Yuan was not present. Otherwise, he would definitely be completely shocked. What the skinny old man said could not be said to have nothing to do with what he was thinking. It could only be said to be exactly the same as if the old man had completely seen through his thoughts. However, although this skinny old man was scheming, he was not invincible. He had even miscalculated something. The venerable orders that Wang Yi had written were not only to limit the scope of conflict. He simply forbade any conflict in Kang City. This was indeed beyond everyone's expectations. Martial artists were all hot-blooded and focused on taking revenge on the spot. No one expected Wang Yi to be so ruthless and directly restrict all conflicts. After listening to the skinny old man's analysis, Lord Wuqing immediately clapped his hands and laughed. He could not help but praise, as expected of the wise Elder Wu. "Listening to your words is better than studying for 10 years. With all his worries gone, Lord Wuqing no longer cared. He looked at the others and said in high spirits, "Wu Ji, go and put some pressure on Fu Enji. If he wants to revive his wife, don't play any tricks. Tell him to hurry up and settle the matter." This is from the SoundStories Audiobook YouTube channel. As soon as he finished speaking, the person called Wu Ji stood up. He first bowed slightly to Lord Wuqing, and then his figure instantly disappeared. Lord Wuqing stared in the direction where the other party had disappeared, but there was no focus in his pupils as if he was daydreaming. As if he had thought of something, Lord Wuqing's expression instantly became extremely ferocious. He roared crazily, "Soon, soon. No matter who it is, as long as they dare to ruin my race's plan to descend, I will definitely not let them off." After saying that, Lord Wuqing subconsciously clenched his fists tightly. Boom, boom, boom. What was terrifying was that Lord Wuqing did not use any mighty force. He only relied on his physical strength to squeeze the void with his palms, causing explosions to sound. It was as if this space was about to be cut apart by this terrifying fist. However, this shocking scene did not last long before Lord Wuqing returned to normal. The private room fell silent again as if nothing had happened. The next afternoon, there was already a sea of people outside the Guardian's residence. Countless experts had gathered here. Meanwhile, the city guards were maintaining order to prevent ordinary people from approaching. Fang Yuan stood on the steps and glanced at the noisy crowd below with different expressions. His expression was neither happy nor sad. No one could guess what he was thinking. As time passed, the patience of the martial artists below was also being consumed. Seeing that Fang Yuan was standing there calmly and did not speak, in the end, someone with a bad temper could not help but jump out. He carried his weapon on his shoulder and shouted rather aggressively, "Guardian Fang, everyone is quite busy. If you have anything to say, just say it. After that, everyone can go about their own business." Once someone started, someone else followed. As soon as he finished speaking, another Rank 9 Grandmaster said, Guardian Fang, aren't you putting on too much airs? You were the one who invited us to gather here, but now you're not saying a word. What's the meaning of this? Are you trying to make fun of us? These words were quite impolite. If not for the fear of the Venerable Order, this person would have directly pointed at Fang Yuan's nose and scolded him. After all, Fang Yuan was only a rank 8 Grandmaster. Even if he was the guardian appointed by Langya County City, unless it was in the face of major issues, a Grandmaster realm expert was definitely qualified to give him a hard time. Actually, many of the experts present were basically here for the Venerable Order. If not for the Venerable Order, with Fang Yuan's shamelessness, if more than 30% of the experts came today, one could say that Fang Yuan had a wide social circle. As for the rest of the people, it was unknown if they were really anxious from waiting or if they had other motives, but they also followed along and started stirring up trouble. Fang Yuan did not feel any displeasure or impatience when he heard this. He reached out and pressed down slightly, indicating to everyone that he had something to say. After the scene finally quietened down, Fang Yuan cupped his fists at everyone and said, Everyone, calm down. It's not that I'm putting on airs and deliberately stalling for time to embarrass everyone. It's just that it's not time yet. Perhaps there are still experts who haven't arrived. If I rashly read the Venerable Order now, not only will I fail to live up to the Venerable's request, but I will also be irresponsible to everyone. Seeing that Fang Yuan had already mentioned the Venerable, everyone had to suppress their anger. Fortunately, it was not long before noon. Everyone could only wait patiently. It seemed that someone had been keeping an eye on the time. It was just noon, so he said directly, Guardian Fang, it's already noon. Please give us the orders from the Lord Venerable. As soon as he finished speaking, the scene instantly became extremely quiet. Everyone stopped talking at the same time and their gazes gathered on Fang Yuan. It had to be said that Fang Yuan had not been a guardian for so many years for nothing. He had seen all kinds of storms and even the siege of hundreds of millions of beasts. Now that he was being stared at by so many experts, if it were anyone else, they might have long collapsed from the terrifying pressure. However, Fang Yuan seemed to be fine and could still stand there calmly. Under everyone's gaze, Fang Yuan took out a palm-sized piece of zon paper that was folded neatly. At this moment, everyone's gaze instantly shifted from Fang Yuan to the paper in his hand. However, when they understood the material of the paper, everyone's expressions became a little strange. They were also cursing in their hearts. This Venerable Order, which represented the will and dignity of a Venerable, was actually directly written on ordinary zon paper. Wasn't this a little too childish? Fang Yuan did not care what others thought and opened the zon paper in his hand. Stop it! Two flamboyant words instantly appeared in front of everyone's faces. Before everyone could react, Fang Yuan directly activated the power of the Venerable Order. The words, "Stop it," instantly erupted with boundless power and divine light. At the same time, Fang Yuan threw the paper lightly. The paper moved without the help of any wind and floated directly above the Guardian's residence. Everyone couldn't help but stare blankly. If not for the fact that the zon paper was indeed emitting a terrifying power, who would dare to believe that this was the Venerable Order? Fang Yuan still stood with his hands behind his back. The paper scattered rays of light that enveloped him. Then, Fang Yuan swept his gaze across the people with different expressions again and said calmly, Everyone, this is the Venerable Order. Everyone revealed excited and fanatical expressions when they heard this. They bowed in unison to show their respect for the Venerable. With the Venerable Order in front of them, the attitude of the many experts present was naturally much better. One of the rank 9 Grandmasters cupped his fists and suddenly said, Guardian Fang, may I ask what the meaning of this is? Fang Yuan first nodded slightly at the Grandmaster who spoke. Then, he smiled and said, Lord Venerable Jinlin Guoshi has ordered that from today onwards, there will be no conflict in Kang City. Actually, Fang Yuan was also very helpless. Wang Yi did not want his existence to be leaked, so he had no choice but to use the name of Jinlin Guoshi that was circulating outside. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, there was an uproar below. Although they did not dare to make a commotion in front of the Venerable Order, they still started discussing softly. First, everyone was shocked by the contents of the Venerable Order. The entire Kang City was actually forbidden from fighting. Second, they were shocked by the Venerable's name. It was not Venerable Ning Jing who everyone was familiar with. Instead, it was the mysterious Venerable, Jinlin Guoshi. When this Venerable Order was issued, there were indeed some who were happy and some who were sad. It naturally did not affect the martial artists who came to Kang City to participate in the auction and look for opportunities to meet Wang Yi. To those martial artists who wanted to meet Wang Yi, this was still great news. This was because they had come to meet Wang Yi and find their own opportunities. However, this was not good news for those who wanted to capture Hua Changyan alive in pursuit of the bounty from the Tianzuo Taoist temple. It had to be known that even if Hua Changyan was wanted, she was still a heavenly talent. Her strength was not weak, and it was not easy to capture her alive. Now that no conflicts were allowed in Kang City, as long as Hua Changyan was determined not to leave the city, who could do anything to her? Even the victim, the Tianzuo Taoist temple, would probably have to swallow their anger and not dare to be impudent here. Now that the Venerable Order was in front of them, it had become a fact that no disputes were allowed in Kang City. Whether the people present were willing or not, they could not change this fact. In the end, they could only bow and reply in unison, "We accept the order." Seeing this, Fang Yuan's expressionless face finally revealed a faint smile. It felt like the dark clouds above his head had dispersed. He no longer had to worry about the ordinary citizens being affected. At this moment, someone suddenly stood up and said in a clear voice, "We all came because of Jinlin Guoxi's reputation and wanted to meet him. However, we were never able to find a way. I didn't expect an opportunity to come today. Guardian Fang, please tell us where Lord Venerable Jinlin Guoxi is." Fang Yuan knew that someone would ask this, so he had already thought of an excuse. He cupped his hands at the person and said with a smile, "Sorry, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. Lord Venerable Jinlin Guoxi was indeed in Kang City previously, but he left after giving me the Venerable Order. I don't even know where he went and if he will return." Fang Yuan's words were indeed good. Not only did he hide Wang Yi's whereabouts from everyone, but he also vaguely indicated that he had a deep relationship with Jinlin Guoxi. That person was naturally extremely indignant, but there was nothing he could do. He could only shake his head and sigh. "It seems that we are not lucky enough to meet Lord Venerable Jinlin Guoxi." Seeing that almost all the experts present looked disappointed, Fang Yuan changed the topic and said again, "Everyone." Everyone was attracted by the sound and their gazes gathered on Fang Yuan again. Fang Yuan still had a smile on his face as he continued, "When Lord Venerable Jinlin Guoxi bestowed the Venerable Order, he said that he had imprinted a wisp of his martial will in it. Those who are overflowing with talent or have deep opportunities might be able to comprehend an offensive technique. I'll place this Venerable Order here. If you're interested, you can comprehend it here. During this period, the Guardian's residence will be in charge of all food and accommodation." Fang Yuan naturally obtained Wang Yi's approval if he dared to say this. Although no one dared to disobey the Venerable Order, they would still be a little unhappy. After all, this would ruin many people's opportunities. Fang Yuan directly relayed these concerns to Wang Yi, and Wang Yi was even more straightforward. He directly left a wisp of his martial will on the Venerable Order. It would simply ruin some people's opportunities, right? To Wang Yi, this was not a problem at all. He would just leave some opportunities for them. This was also to strengthen the human race. Actually, there were times when Wang Yi felt like he was a child of wealth. He would give away all the good things he had. However, given the current situation of the human race, unless Wang Yi could ignore everything, there were times when he really had to be the child of wealth. Boom. Fang Yuan had just finished speaking when there was an uproar below. No matter what the reason was, the expressions of the people who came to Kang City changed. This was a great opportunity that would allow them to reach the heavens in a single bound. As long as they could comprehend something, it would be worth it even if they did not gain anything else from this trip. "We thank Lord Venerable Jinlin Guoxi." After the commotion, the many experts below first bowed to the Venerable Order floating in the air, then cupped their hands at Fang Yuan and said, "In that case, I'll have to trouble Guardian Fang." After saying their thanks, everyone no longer cared about their status and environment. Instead, they simply chose to sit on the ground. No matter their motives for coming to Kang City, no one chose to leave this place. Experts above rank 7 directly used their spiritual power to touch the Venerable Order in midair, hoping to resonate with it and comprehend the venerable level martial intent contained in it. Meanwhile, martial artists below the Grand Master realm did not have spiritual power yet. They could only stare at the two words on the Venerable Order in hopes of comprehending some of the truths of the martial path. Naturally, Fang Yuan was abnormally happy when he saw this. The problem that had troubled him for a long time was finally resolved. The group of experts below could comprehend the Venerable Order as much as they wanted, but Fang Yuan could not. After all, he was the guardian. There were many official matters that he had to handle. He did not have that much time to stay here. Moreover, Wang Yi had given him a total of 3 Venerable Orders. Not to mention this, Fang Yuan still had 2 in his hands. If he needed to comprehend it, he could do so anytime. There was no need for him to stay here. Fang Yuan whispered a few words to the city guards beside him. After instructing them to try their best to satisfy the requirements of those martial artists, he prepared to leave. Boom! At this moment, there seemed to be an explosion in the crowd. At the same time, a golden pillar of light instantly shot into the sky from the corner. Such a huge commotion and phenomenon naturally alarmed everyone. Fang Yuan also stopped in his tracks and looked over in surprise. He really did not expect that after a while, someone would actually comprehend something from the Venerable Order. Moreover, judging from the current situation, this person's gains were definitely not small. It was even very likely that he had comprehended some kind of powerful offensive technique or a heaven-defying cultivation technique. In the place where the golden pillar of light shot into the sky, a terrifying existence with an aura as deep as an abyss was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. A powerful shield that was completely condensed from golden light floated and spun in front of him. Sensing the wisps of indestructible aura emanating from the shield, everyone's expressions changed. Even Fang Yuan on the platform was no exception. How strong! It was so strong that it was terrifying, so strong that it made one feel suffocated. Not long after, the powerful martial artist who had comprehended the golden shield suddenly opened his eyes. Light flashed in his eyes, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. Everyone present revealed looks of envy and even jealousy. Even their breathing could not help but become heavier. Finally, someone could not help but ask curiously, "Forgive me for being presumptuous, but may I ask if you have comprehended Lord Venerable's martial will?" The man nodded slightly when he heard this, but he could not hide his smugness. He could not be blamed for not being shrewd enough to hide his joy. This opportunity was too great and too heaven-defying. Seeing that he had nodded in agreement, the crowd was silent for a moment before boiling over again. Many people could not help but comment, "I wonder if you can give me some pointers on how to comprehend the Venerable Order." That's right, sir, please enlighten us. This Venerable Order is really too profound. We can't find a way to comprehend it at all. We're all very envious of you for comprehending this mystic technique, Lord. If you don't mind, why don't you show us your power? It'll also broaden our horizons. Ellipsis. Seeing that everyone was asking questions, the man shook his head helplessly and sighed. "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. It was only by chance that my spiritual power resonated with the Venerable Order. That's how I proudly comprehended a wisp of the Lord Venerable's martial will. It's not that I'm hiding my strength, but even I don't know which direction to comprehend the technique from." Everyone looked disappointed when they heard this. They had thought that there would be a shortcut, but they did not expect it to be blocked before they even started on their journey. Seeing that everyone was disappointed, the person changed the topic and continued, "However, it's still possible for everyone to witness the power of the mystic technique." Everyone couldn't help but show interest again. Seeing this, that person continued, "I've comprehended a wisp of indestructible Vajra intent from the Venerable Order. I can condense an invincible Vajra shield to protect me. With my peak rank 8 cultivation and this secret technique, I should be able to withstand the attack of an early rank 9 Grandmaster." Hiss. Everyone couldn't help but gasp when they heard this. If this person wasn't spouting nonsense, this was really terrifying. It would be a battle with an enemy of a higher level. Furthermore, it was a terrifying battle where a rank 8 expert won against a rank 9 expert despite the large difference in strength. As soon as he finished speaking, someone suddenly stood up and cupped his hands at that person. "It's a coincidence. I just broke through to rank 9 recently. If Brother Yi Kai doesn't mind, how about we give it a try?" It was obvious that the two of them knew each other, and their relationship should be quite good in private. Otherwise, this person wouldn't have rashly suggested testing their moves. The rank 8 Grandmaster called Yi Kai nodded slightly, agreeing to the other party's request. Of course, the two of them also obtained Fang Yuan's agreement to test the power of the technique. After all, it was clearly stated in the Venerable Order that conflicts were forbidden in Kang City. If they were suppressed because of a trial battle, they would really be wronged. Fang Yuan naturally had no objections to this. He only instructed the two of them not to implicate the ordinary people in the city. Then, He prepared to watch the two of them fight with interest. Everyone was naturally overjoyed by this. They consciously retreated and opened up an area for the two of them, leaving enough space to fight. Ye Kai did not let everyone wait any longer. He reached out and moved the golden shield to cover himself. The rank 9 Grandmaster Realm expert did not hold back and used his iron fists to attack the golden shield. Of course, although Ye Kai said that he could withstand the attack of a rank 9 Grandmaster with his mystic technique, this person did not dare to use his full strength. It would be bad if the golden shield could not withstand it, causing the other party to be severely injured. Boom! The two of them collided fiercely, and the terrifying aftershock spread in all directions. There were naturally experts in the crowd who blocked it. The dust gradually dissipated. What was shocking was that Ye Kai, who was at the peak of rank 8, did not take half a step back from the Grandmaster Realm attack. The two of them fought evenly for the first round. Seeing how powerful the golden shield was, the rank 9 Grandmaster couldn't help but praise, what a powerful technique. Then, he no longer held back. After reminding the other party to be careful, he waved his fists again and attacked. The two of them instantly fought again. The more he fought, the more shocked this rank 9 Grandmaster felt. Other than not using his weapon, he had already displayed his peak combat strength. However, even so, other than suppressing Ye Kai and making him look miserable, he could not cause him any substantial harm. The two of them were not fighting to the death. After testing the power of the golden shield, the rank 9 Grandmaster stopped attacking and jumped out of the battle. Then, he said in shock, "Such a wonderful technique is indeed heaven-defying. Brother Ye Kai is really lucky." Fang Yuan was secretly excited when he saw this. Was Ye Kai a living advertisement? With him comprehending the mystic technique, who would be willing to leave this place and cause trouble in the city? Upon thinking of this, Fang Yuan couldn't help but clap and laugh. Everyone, a great opportunity is right in front of you. As long as you comprehend the Venerable Order, you can have the terrifying ability to fight experts of a higher level. You can't miss this chance. I hope that everyone here can gain some insights from the Venerable Order and increase your combat strength. Actually, there was no need for Fang Yuan to say this. The many experts present were not stupid. How could they not know how heaven-defying this opportunity was? Without another word, everyone sat cross-legged again and continued to comprehend the Venerable Order floating in midair. In the next few days, since the construction of the Taoist temple had been completed, Su Xia returned to the Taoist temple to cultivate. Interestingly, Hua Changyan had somehow gotten herself a waiter's uniform and became a waitress in the fated cafeteria. After returning home from the Taoist temple these few days, Su Xia would pull Hua Changyan away to shop. Alternatively, the two of them would hide in the bedroom and gossip about how Grandmaster Shu was too soft-hearted, and how the beasts were too scheming. In short, their relationship was getting better and better. Now, Hua Changyan no longer had to worry about encountering any danger when she went out, let alone worry about someone thinking of using her to exchange for the bounty of the Tianzuo Taoist temple. This was because 2 days ago, there was already news in Tianzuo City that there was something fishy about Hua Changyan's murder of her master and that the case needed to be re-investigated. For the time being, all bounties on Hua Changyan had been temporarily suspended. As for Wang Yi, who had nothing to do, he had been cooped up at home. Other than the Yonghua Chamber of Commerce sending him an invitation to attend the auction in half a month, he had never met anyone else. Moreover, the Yonghua Chamber of Commerce had sent an acquaintance of Wang Yi's, Jia Shi, who had renovated his villa and brought him to sell the jade stone marrow. Actually, it was not that Wang Yi had not done anything during the past few days at home. After being teased by the system a few times, he had learned to be smarter. After reflecting on his mistakes, he was prepared to scam the system. Once, when he used the directional sign-in function, Wang Yi directly chose 1,000,000 conate crystals. However, what made Wang Yi so depressed that he almost vomited blood was that all the possible loopholes that he could think of had long been blocked by the system. The system had given him a 0.001% success rate when he requested 1,000,000 conate crystals. It was exactly the same as the success rate of the Great Divine Power, World Destruction Palm. Furthermore, what made Wang Yi even crazier was that the system only gave him a 100% success rate when he reduced the number of conate crystals to 1. Otherwise, even if he wanted 2 conate crystals, the success rate given by the system was less than 10%. Actually, the system's intention was already very clear. If he wanted to level up, he had to think of a way to get conate crystals himself. He couldn't expect to obtain them by signing in. Of course, it wasn't impossible for him to sign in and obtain the connate crystals from the system before upgrading it. If he simply signed in for connate crystals every day, he would be able to upgrade the system in 1,000,000 days, provided that he had such a long lifespan. It could be said that Wang Yi's invisible confrontation with the system ended in a complete defeat. Since this path was blocked, Wang Yi could only settle for the next best thing. He used the next few days to sign in for a few more cultivation techniques to make up for his shortcomings. However, this time, Wang Yi's rhythm was also disrupted by the sign-in process. His original plan was to first cultivate his physical strength to perfection so that he could completely open the treasures of his physical body and release its endless physical potential. However, Wang Yi had killed too many Yang God experts previously, and there was even a supreme creature in the connate realm who had died under his saber. Thus, a terrifying level of pure and ownerless spiritual power had accumulated in Wang Yi's spiritual space. After he signed in to obtain his first cultivation technique, the connate purple golden red gourd visualization technique, the speed of his breakthrough was like a hot knife cutting through butter. In just a few breaths, he had reached level 13 and achieved perfection. The connate purple gold red gourd emitted a terrifying power and condensed in Wang Yi's spiritual space. Wang Yi's combat strength had also increased greatly in an instant. At the very least, he could easily suppress his previous self. As for the pure spiritual power stored in his spiritual space, he had only consumed 60 to 70% of it. As for the other spiritual power technique that he had signed in to obtain, it gave Wang Yi a headache. It was called, "Baby, please turn around and visualize." The moment he obtained this cultivation technique after signing in, Wang Yi was dumbfounded. The first thing he thought of was the legendary immortal slaying flying saber. Even Wang Yi was shocked by his own thoughts. That was the immortal slaying flying saber said to be able to kill all living beings. Of course, it was unknown if all living beings include sages. After all, sages were existences that lived as long as heaven and earth, shone as brightly as the sun and moon, and were immortal. It was very likely that they had long left the category of living beings. Actually, Wang Yi could not be blamed for thinking too much. After all, he had only cultivated 3 spiritual techniques in total. With the little Li flying dagger technique, he had cultivated 3 flying daggers that could cut through one's physical body, true qi, and spiritual power. From the connate purple golden red gourd visualization technique, he cultivated the connate purple golden red gourd that could be used for both offense and defense. Meanwhile, from the "baby, please turn around and visualize" technique, he cultivated a 5-word mantra that had all kinds of unbelievable power. If it was just a single cultivation technique, it could still be considered a coincidence. However, when these 3 cultivation techniques were gathered together, it was no longer a coincidence. Unfortunately, because Wang Yi only had 30 to 40% of the pure and ownerless spiritual power left in his spiritual space, he could only push his cultivation technique to the peak of level 12. Apart from making his spiritual power stronger, it did not increase his combat strength much. However, Wang Yi had a very strong premonition that as long as he broke through to level 13 of the "baby, please turn around and visualize" technique, his spiritual power would definitely undergo some unpredictable changes. As for when he signed in to cultivate his true qi, it was within Wang Yi's expectations. He had obtained the 9 yin divine technique. He had also obtained the supreme ultimate divine technique. The extremely powerful 9 yin true qi was used to complement the extremely powerful 9 suns true qi. Then, he used the power of yin and yang to fuse, control, and coordinate the 2 terrifying powers. As for Wang Yi, his main focus would be on the few cultivation techniques that had yet to reach perfection. As long as all 9 cultivation techniques broke through to level 13 and achieved perfection, he could directly pluck the connate phala and fuse it into his body, thereby advancing to the connate realm. Crack! The door of the villa opened gently. Wang Yi raised his head when he heard the commotion. He saw Su Xia carrying a thick book in her arms while Hua Chengyan carried 2 jars of wine. They walked in happily. Wang Yi was already used to their behavior and did not pay much attention to it. However, the moment he saw the book in Su Xia's arms, he could no longer remain calm. It was The Legend of the White Snake. Wang Yi felt as if 10,000 alpacas were running through his heart. It was as if the entire world was joking with him. Not long ago, he had heard those words from his previous life uttered by the Yang God race. This was already unbelievable. But it had only been a few days. He had actually seen something from his previous life again. Most importantly, it was from Su Xia. Of course, Wang Yi only saw the book's cover, not the actual contents. It was most likely just a coincidence and not what he had suspected. At the thought of this, Wang Yi calmed his emotions. As his spiritual space trembled slightly, a wisp of spiritual power surged out and enveloped the book, The Legend of the White Snake. The more he read the book with his spiritual power, the stranger Wang Yi's expression became. After reading everything, Wang Yi no longer knew how to describe his feelings. There was only one thought left in his mind. Such talent. The person who wrote this book was definitely a talent. The story in the book was almost exactly the same as that classic TV series from his previous life. The general content was that the beasts were preparing to attack the human city. However, the guardian, Shu Fahai, was too strong. As a result, the beasts could not break through the city at all. After failing a few times, a wise being from the beast race suggested using a honey trap to disintegrate the human race's giant city from the inside. Coincidentally, Grandmaster Shu Fahai had one son called Shu Xian. Thus, the beast sent Little White and Little Green, who had transformed into human forms, to seduce Shu Xian. As time passed, Shu Xian, the son of the guardian, developed feelings for Little White and Little Green. When Shu Fahai discovered that his two daughters-in-law were beasts, the two of them were already pregnant. After that, under Shu Xian's pleading, Shu Fahai relented and allowed the two of them to exist. In the end, they were not of the same race, so their hearts were definitely different. However, not only were the two of them not grateful, but they even revealed Shu Fahai's whereabouts at the critical moment. In the end, the guardian died in battle and the huge city was breached by beasts. It was no wonder that Su Xia and Hua Chengyun would hide in the room and complain that Grandmaster Shu was kind-hearted, while the beasts were too scheming. To be honest, Wang Yi was really impressed by the author's imagination. He simply made Shu Xian a father in this story. Although he was complaining, Wang Yi was already certain that the author of The Legend of the White Snake was definitely related to his previous world. Although all of this sounded troublesome, it had only happened in the blink of an eye. With Wang Yi's terrifying spiritual power, it would not even take him a second to read the entire book. Xia, wait. At the thought of this, Wang Yi called out to Su Xia. Actually, Su Xia was not prepared to go upstairs. She knew that apart from drinking tea, Wang Yi also liked wine. When Su Xia was shopping with Hua Chengqing today, she happened to come across a very special wine. Thus, she decided to buy it and bring it back for Wang Yi to try. When Wang Yi suddenly called her, Su Xia's eyes suddenly flashed. She asked in confusion, "What's wrong, Yi?" Wang Yi remained calm and pointed at the book in Su Xia's arms. He smiled and asked, "Who gave you this book?" Su Xia thought it was something important, but she did not expect Wang Yi to ask this. She placed the book on the coffee table and said with a smile, "Are you talking about this? I saw it in the bookstore when I was shopping with Sister Hua the other day. I thought it was interesting, so I bought it." Wang Yi nodded slightly. He knew that no one was plotting against Su Xia and him, so he did not continue to harp on this matter. He just smiled and said, "Not bad. It's quite an interesting book." The two women did not understand what Wang Yi meant, but they did not think too much about it. Then, Hua Changyan placed the 2 jars of wine on the coffee table and said respectfully, "Lord Venerable, this is the wine that your wife specially brought back for you." Su Xia was helpless when she saw this. She had advised Hua Changyan many times that she did not have to be so reserved at home, nor did she have to always call them Lord Venerable and Madam respectively. However, Hua Changyan insisted on respect and order. She was already extremely grateful for Wang Yi's protection. She could not afford to drop the necessary etiquette. In the end, Su Xia could only let her be. However, this did not affect their relationship. After removing the seals on the wine jars, Su Xia took out a wine glass and filled it. Then, she pushed it in front of Wang Yi and said with a smile, "Try it and see how it tastes." Wang Yi picked up his wine glass and sniffed the special fragrance of the wine. His expression could not help but become interesting again. Seeing that Wang Yi's expression was not right, Su Xia could not help but ask, "Do you not like it?" Wang Yi shook his head slightly and simply downed the wine in his glass. As expected, it was exactly the same as the Baiju one. In his previous life, the taste of the wine was mellow and spicy. After swallowing it, it was as strong as fire, constantly stimulating the nerves and taste buds. After smacking his lips, Wang Yi smiled and said, "How can I not like it?" It's just that I've never tasted such good wine before and am a little lost. To be honest, Wang Yi couldn't wait to meet the author of The Legend of the White Snake and the producer of the Baiju. He wanted to see who they were. Seeing that Wang Yi liked it, Su Xia was naturally happy. She reached out and filled the empty glass with wine. After that, Wang Yi chatted with Su Xia for a while and asked for the address of the liquor store. Then, Wang Yi used the excuse that he needed to make a trip to the guardian's residence. Su Xia did not suspect anything and went upstairs with Hua Changyan to continue reading The Legend of the White Snake. As soon as he left the villa, Wang Yi simply called Fang Ming's. Almost instantly, the call went through and Fang Ming's surprised voice came from the other end. Sir. Wang Yi did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. I need you to do something for me. Hearing that Wang Yi had something to instruct him, Fang Ming's immediately perked up and said excitedly, Sir, please instruct me. Wang Yi continued, help me look up the author of the novel, The Legend of the White Snake. After Fang Ming's agreed, Wang Yi hung up and walked toward the address Su Xia had given him. He headed toward Dukong Winery. It was a very ordinary and small winery situated downtown in the center of Kang City. Even with the speed of an ordinary person, they could reach it in half an hour. Although this name seemed very ordinary in this world, it was familiar to everyone in his previous life. It was also because of this name that Wang Yi was even more certain that the owner of this winery was definitely related to his previous life. Ding ling ling. However, just as Wang Yi walked out of Dukong Winery, Fang Ming's called him back before he could enter. Wang Yi gently pressed the answer button and Fang Ming's voice immediately sounded from the receiver. Sir, I've found the information on the person you wanted to investigate. Wang Yi nodded as he held his phone. He was clearly in a good mood. He couldn't help but smile and say, how efficient. Tell me, who is this person? Upon hearing Wang Yi's praise, Fang Ming's couldn't help but reveal an excited expression on the other side. Then, he continued, Ming's will naturally do his best for what Sir has instructed. That person's name is Lu Yanyan. He's 28 years old this year. He once published the novel, The Legend of the White Snake, under the pen name, I'm Yanyan. He now lives downtown, at Dukong Winery. Wang Yi looked through the open door and saw a delicate-looking girl busying herself inside. The corners of his mouth curled up into a different kind of smile. There was nothing to hesitate about. Wang Yi walked straight into the winery. In the wine shop, Lu Yanyan was wearing a gray apron around her slender waist. Her fair forehead was covered in sweat, and she was constantly wiping items with a cloth in her hands. Seeing that someone had come to visit, Lu Yanyan smiled sweetly and invited him warmly. Please come in. The wine in our shop is brewed with a new formula. It's different from the wine in the rest of the world. It's fragrant, spicy, and lingering. Wang Yi followed Lu Yanyan into the winery and scanned his surroundings. His eyes could not help but sparkle. The layout of the shop was very simple. Apart from the counter, there were several large wine jars that were as tall as a person. Although the mouth of the jars was sealed, one could still smell the fragrance of wine. Meanwhile, the walls were painted very white. Apart from some writing, there were no extra decorations. However, Wang Yi's gaze was attracted by the words on the wall. Liangzhou. Verse 1. Fine wine in a luminous cup. We want to drink, but the Pippa 1 urges us on. Bring in the wine 1. Fancy horses and invaluable fur coats will be exchanged for good wine. We will share our sorrows together. Drinking wine, together 1. Don't refuse this cup of wine. The spring wind welcomes you. Ellipsis. Even though the complete poems were not written on the walls, the lines related to alcohol were written. The handwriting was neat and light. It should have been written by a woman. Wang Yi thought about it and deduced that they must have been written by Lu Yanyan. After seeing these lines, Wang Yi could almost confirm some of his guesses. Seeing that Wang Yi was staring at the wall, Lu Yanyan said in embarrassment, my handwriting is bad. I've embarrassed myself in front of the guest. Upon hearing this, Wang Yi shook his head slightly and praised sincerely, your handwriting is very good. The poems are even better. Lu Yanyan did not continue on the topic of handwriting and poetry. She wiped the sweat off her forehead with the back of her hand and introduced Wang Yi enthusiastically, Sir, why don't you take a look at the wine in our shop first? This is Maotai 1. Its characteristics include its outstanding fragrance, as well as its elegant and delicate taste. It is mellow and has a lasting aftertaste after entering the mouth. The empty glass can also retain its fragrance for a long time. There's also this 5 grains liquor. Its unique fragrance is long-lasting, sweet, and refreshing. The various flavors are perfectly coordinated, and the alcohol taste is the most comprehensive. Ellipsis. Listening to the familiar names that Lu Yanyan mentioned, Wang Yi's gaze gradually lost focus. His consciousness seemed to have returned to the era of the information explosion. Sir. Lu Yanyan, who was still introducing the wine to Wang Yi, turned around and realized that Wang Yi was staring blankly at her. She could not help but wave her hand in front of Wang Yi's eyes and call out to him. Hearing the voice, Wang Yi finally recovered from his daze. He looked at Lu Yanyan and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I suddenly thought of something." As soon as he finished speaking, Wang Yi suddenly remembered the secret signal of the Yang God race. He subconsciously blurted out, "Heavenly King covers the ground tiger." After saying that, Wang Yi realized this was too direct. Although there was a more tactful way, he did not regret it. After all, his purpose for coming here today was to confirm the identity of Lu Yanyan, who had brewed the strong baijiu and magically modified the legend of the white snake, and see what kind of holy being she was. Meanwhile, when Lu Yanyan heard these words, her body stiffened as if she had been frozen by some technique. Meanwhile, her face changed several times. There was alarm, shock, disbelief, and the refusal to accept the situation. Various expressions appeared on her face. At this moment, the complexity of her emotions was not enough to explain to outsiders. Even though she was afraid, she was also excited. She was afraid that her identity as a transmigrator would be exposed and she would be captured as a guinea pig to be dissected and studied. She was excited. Perhaps the young man standing in front of her was also from planet Earth. The familiarity of meeting an old friend in a foreign world seemed even more precious. After muttering for a long time, Lu Yanyan threw away the fear in her heart and finally replied, "The pagoda suppresses the river demon." When Wang Yi saw that the other party had completed the phrase, his face instantly revealed a look of surprise. However, this was a serious matter, after all, so he had to confirm it more clearly. After pondering for a moment, Wang Yi said again, "Man at birth." Lu Yanyan did not hesitate and said directly, "Is inherently good." Wang Yi said, "Zhao, Qian, Sun. Li 1. Lu Yanyan replied, "Zhou, Wu, Zheng, Wang." Wang Yi said, "The little sparrow wears flowery clothes 1. Lu Yanyan continued, "You come here every spring." Ellipsis. The two of them exchanged countless secret codes that belong solely to planet Earth. They couldn't help but feel their mouths go dry, but they were completely certain of each other's identities. Lu Yanyan turned around and closed the shop door. She did not care about the gender difference and reached out to grab Wang Yi's arm. He said excitedly, "Brother, which batch of explorers are you from?" Suddenly remembering that she had yet to introduce himself, Lu Yanyan said excitedly again, "Big brother, my name is Lu Yanyan. I'm from the 5th batch of explorers who passed the Myriad World Seal." When Wang Yi heard this, he raised his eyebrows and a look of confusion flashed across his eyes. He subconsciously asked, "What is the Myriad World Seal?" "An explorer." Wang Yi was puzzled, but Lu Yanyan was even more puzzled than him. However, in the next moment, Lu Yanyan seemed to have thought of something and shock appeared on her face. She covered her red lips with one hand and pointed at Wang Yi with the other. Her voice was trembling as she stammered, Transmigrator. "Big brother, are you a transmigrator? Are you Jinlin Guoshi, who caused quite an uproar a while back?" Wang Yi was a little confused. He did not know why Lu Yanyan would look so shocked when they were both transmigrators. However, he still nodded and replied, "That's right. I transmigrated to this world by chance. I had nothing to do. I was just joking when I gave myself the title of Jinlin Guoshi. I didn't expect it to spread so quickly." Wang Yi spoke casually, but Lu Yanyan could no longer maintain her composure after hearing that. She had been in this world for some time. Although she could not cultivate the martial Dao, she still knew a little about the martial Dao system of this world. Of course, this understanding was only limited to the martial arts of Kang City. Lu Yanyan only knew that martial artists were divided into battle soldier rank, battle warrior rank, and battle god rank. As for the guardian of Kang City, he was a battle god rank expert. He was a grandmaster realm figure who was already standing at the top of the martial arts pyramid. The guardian alone could protect millions of living beings in this dangerous world. Meanwhile, the roar of the legendary Jinluo Guoshi had killed hundreds of millions of beasts. In terms of status and strength, he had completely surpassed a grandmaster realm guardian. It had to be known that Lu Yanyan was not a passive transmigrator. She appeared in this world with her own purpose and mission. She needed to make herself powerful. Unfortunately, although she had been in this world for some time, for some reason, she could not cultivate at all. Thus, she could only settle for the next best thing and accumulate a huge amount of wealth to hire powerful martial artists or find powerful martial artists as her backing. However, because of the special system of this world, she did not accumulate any wealth, nor did she find a powerful backer. However, just as Lu Yanyan was beginning to despair, she actually met a fellow transmigrator from planet Earth. More importantly, this fellow citizen from planet Earth was the legendary Jinlin Guoshi. He was a powerful existence above the Grand Masters. While Wang Yi answered the other party's question, he naturally did not forget to ask his questions again. What is the Myriad World Seal? What is an explorer? Since she had met the right person, she had to say it even if Wang Yi did not ask Lu Yanyan anything. This was because the person in front of her had become her last hope. After organizing her thoughts, Lu Yanyan said, "Big brother, before I answer your questions, can I ask when you transmigrated?" Anyway, this was not a secret. Wang Yi nodded slightly and said, "About a month ago." Lu Yan nodded when she heard this. A look of realization appeared on her face. Then, she said, "No wonder. No wonder. According to the time you transmigrated, it's normal not to know the current situation on planet Earth." As the saying went, a casual remark could reveal much to an attentive listener. As soon as Lu Yanyan finished speaking, Wang Yi immediately thought of the Yang God race's secret communication code. He felt his heart skip a beat. Suddenly, he had a bad feeling. No way, if the Yang God race had really invaded planet Earth, the humans on planet Earth who were very weak individually would probably find it difficult to resist the invasion even with the help of terrifying technological weapons. If the Yang God race was fast enough, the humans of planet Earth might have already gone extinct. Wang Yi suppressed his urge to continue speculating and said very cautiously, "Has planet Earth been invaded by a powerful enemy?" Lu Yanyan, who was about to continue, was stunned on the spot. She looked terrified and flustered as if she had seen a ghost. She stammered, "B brother, how did you know?" "Oh no, what bad luck, planet Earth had really been invaded." Wang Yi's expression changed drastically when he heard this. Endless killing intent boiled in his heart. He wished he could directly attack the Yang God world with his killing weapon and destroy the entire Yang God race. Even if he had nothing on planet Earth and no family, planet Earth was still the place where he was born and raised after all. If Wang Yi was a leaf, then planet Earth would be the root. The race with which he shared a common bloodline, culture, and inheritance would be the root. But now that someone was about to destroy this root, how could Wang Yi, as a leaf, tolerate it? Who? Wang Yi took a few deep breaths and tried his best to suppress the monstrous killing intent that was about to erupt. He wanted to keep his mind as clear as possible. Since this had already become an established fact, the most important thing now was to think of a way to make up for it and solve the big problem that planet Earth faced. At this moment, Wang Yi's brain seemed to have turned into the most advanced supercomputer. Countless information and data were constantly circulating, searching for possible opportunities to break through. Lu Yanyan's expression and voice appeared in Wang Yi's mind again like a movie. No, Wang Yi suddenly felt that something was unusual. Lu Yanyan was not lying. The fear and panic on her face were not fake, but there was no despair. It had to be known that Lu Yanyan was just an ordinary person without any martial strength. Even if she was a well-trained agent, she could not hide from Wang Yi's spiritual perception. In that case, the only explanation for this situation was that planet Earth had indeed encountered a powerful enemy, but the situation should not be so bad that they would be wiped out immediately, making people feel despair and helplessness. At the thought of this, Wang Yi felt a little relieved. Then, he said, "Let's talk about this later. Tell me how planet Earth is doing now." Lu Yanyan seemed to have thought of something extremely terrifying. Her eyes were filled with fear, and her body couldn't help but tremble. She felt like she was about to collapse. It was obvious that she was under too much mental pressure and had been suppressing it at the bottom of her heart. As a result, her mind was already strained to the limit. Now that she had found someone she could confide in and rely on, it was understandable that she would be in this state. Wang Yi naturally would not look on without doing anything. He used his spiritual power to point at the space between Lu Yanyan's eyebrows with his fingers and forcefully stabilized her mental state that was about to collapse. After a while, Lu Yanyan slowly returned to normal. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and forced a smile. I've embarrassed myself in front of Big Brother. Although Wang Yi did not know the exact situation on planet Earth and had never experienced what Lu Yanyan had experienced, he could understand her feelings. Shaking his head slightly, Wang Yi comforted her softly, with me around in the future, no one will be able to hurt you again. Lu Yanyan seemed to have almost blind trust in Wang Yi. When she heard this, she nodded heavily. Then, she returned to the original topic and said softly again, according to the time you transmigrated, the disaster happened 2 days after you left. Wang Yi nodded to himself. Although he realized that he had transmigrated when he woke up, which was very confusing, he still remembered that before he went to sleep, the country was prosperous and the people were safe. Nothing unusual had happened. However, if it was as Lu Yanyan said, then everything would make sense. Wang Yi did not interrupt Lu Yanyan. After gesturing for her to continue, he quietly became an audience. Lu Yanyan continued, on the day of the disaster, the world seemed to have come to an end. The sky seemed to have shattered, and there were terrifying spatial cracks everywhere. Countless terrifying huge figures walked out of the rifts. They had terrifying power. With a casual wave of their hands, they can shoot down supersonic fighter jets. They can even resist ultimate weapons with their bodies unscathed. In just half a day, planet Earth, with the exception of China, has been reduced to ruins. Even America, which is known as the world's police, was no exception. However, even so, China has paid a huge price. The population has shrunk by at least 50%. When Wang Yi heard this, he felt a chill run down his spine. This was not simply a cold number. Behind this number were fresh lives. Especially with the huge population of China, it was even more terrifying. With Wang Yi's understanding of the Yang God race, a scene had already begun to appear in his mind. With planet Earth's current level of technology, even if they still had hidden methods, they were definitely not a match for the Yang God race. They did not even have the chance to resist. After all, Wang Yi was now a powerful martial artist. He naturally knew how big the gap between ordinary people and martial artists was, especially when facing a powerful race like the Yang God race that specialized in spiritual power. To put it bluntly, even if the humans on planet Earth really had some powerful technological power, they probably wouldn't even have the chance to use it. Even if they could use it, with the Yang God race's terrifying perception of danger, they would probably have already left before the attack arrived. Then how did China resist the enemy? Perhaps even Wang Yi himself did not realize that his tone had completely changed. Regardless of whether Wang Yi admitted it or not, he was afraid now. He was afraid that his previous judgment had been wrong. He was afraid that China would not be able to hold on and would be slaughtered by the Yang God race. If such a situation really happened, Wang Yi's only goal for the rest of his life would probably be to take revenge. He would go crazy and slaughter the martial artists from the Yang God race. Regardless of their strength, regardless of gender, age, or innocence, they were all his targets. Upon hearing Wang Yi's question, Lu Yanyan's mood obviously plummeted. Her eyes instantly turned red, and tears constantly welled up in her eyes. Lu Yanyan sniffed and reached out to wipe her tears. She said in a slightly sobbing voice, at the critical moment, Taoist masters from the 4 sacred Taoist lands walked out. They were led by the current celestial master, Zhang Longhu, and the martial grand master, Taoist Qing Feng, along with thousands of accomplished Taoists. At the cost of sacrificing their own lives, they activated the array formation passed down from ancient times and simply covered the entire territory of China. Only then could they resist the enemy outside the country. When Wang Yi heard this, he could not help but be moved. This was true righteousness. In the face of the rise and fall of the race, not everyone could give up their lives without hesitation, especially those who had successfully cultivated the Tao and could roam freely in the world. Wang Yi could even imagine a group of Taoists standing under the heavens, at the peak of the mountains. They would sacrifice their Tao bodies without hesitation, just to protect their country and the world and keep their enemies at bay. No, Wang Yi suddenly sensed that something was wrong. According to Lu Yanyan, the people who sacrificed themselves were all from the Tao sect. She did not mention any Buddhist monks. Logically speaking, Buddhism was much more prosperous than Taoism in China. Since even Taoists could step forward, it was impossible for the Buddhist sect not to have monks who had achieved the Tao. At the thought of this, Wang Yi's voice couldn't help but turn cold. He asked coldly, could it be that the Buddhist world is in chaos and no one has come out to help the human race? Lu Yanyan seemed to be shocked. It took her a while to react. Then, she shook her head gently and said again, Big brother, it's not what you think. Although no Buddhists sacrifice themselves, their lives are not better than those who have died. Before Celestial Master Zhang and Grandmaster Qing Feng died, they once said that although the array formation was strong, it was like duckweed without a root. Without the support of a powerful foundation, it needed the lifespan of people who have attained the Tao as the source of power. Therefore, several eminent monks and all the Buddhist monks who have achieved the Tao in the temples in the world gathered in the 4 sacred Taoist lands. With their lifespans as the foundation, they supported the entire array formation and allowed it to operate. Only then did the coldness in Wang Yi's heart dissipate. At the same time, he felt relieved. It was indeed as Lu Yanyan had said. The dead were indeed great, but the living had to shoulder the burden. They needed to face a dark future and be ready to sacrifice themselves at all times. Wang Yi suddenly thought of something and his expression became interesting. He could not help but ask again, are there hidden cultivators on planet Earth? It was no wonder that Wang Yi suddenly asked this question. Before he transmigrated, he had heard of cultivation, but he had never seen a cultivator before. He thought that cultivation was just a legend. He thought that planet Earth only took the technological route. However, according to Lu Yanyan, there were cultivators on planet Earth, and they didn't seem weak. Lu Yan nodded seriously and said seriously, there are indeed hidden cultivators on planet Earth, and they're not from just the Buddhist and Taoist sects. There are also powerhouses among the commoners. At this moment, Wang Yi's interest was piqued. He immediately asked again, powerhouses among the commoners. Can you tell me how powerful they are? At this point, Lu Yanyan finally stopped looking so miserable. Her face was filled with pride and admiration, to the point of fanaticism. She said very excitedly, of course. The experts among the commoners are also extremely powerful, but the most dazzling and stunning person is definitely the god of war, Wang Wei. Big brother, can you imagine it? When the array was just activated and everyone was in the despair of the apocalypse. The god of war, Wang Wei, appeared in the world and wandered throughout the entire China by himself. He killed the enemies with a spear alone. It can be said that more than half of the enemies who appeared in China died under the spear of the god of war, Wang Wei. At this moment, Wang Yi had a strange expression on his face. He could not help but mutter softly. Wang Wei, this name was really familiar. However, Wang Yi also knew that with China's huge population, it was normal for people to have similar names. It made sense, but he couldn't help thinking of something else. Wang Yi shook his head vigorously to dispel those messy thoughts, and his mood lightened. At the very least, according to the information he now knew, he could confirm that planet Earth was temporarily safe. At long last, he was no longer as nervous as before. Wang Yi couldn't help but comfort her. Although you've experienced hardship, it's all in the past, right? Lu Yanyan did not show any joy at this. Instead, her expression became bitter again. Shaking her head gently, she sighed and said, it's not in the past, it's not in the past. The god of war, Wang Wei, and a few eminent monks have worked together to deduce that even if everyone's lifespan is sacrificed, the array can only last for 20 years at most. At this moment, Wang Yi also realized that he had misspoken. All he could think about was that China was safe and that the Yang god race hadn't completely conquered it. However, Wang Yi subconsciously ignored the fact that the array formation consumed the lifespans of cultivators. Although China had a large population, not many people had succeeded in cultivation. Since they paid the price of exhausting their lifespan, these cultivators who had achieved the Tao would be exhausted one day. At that time, the array formation would lose its source of power and the human race would probably not be far from being completely wiped out. At this moment, Wang Yi also knew the severity of the matter. However, before he could speak, Lu Yanyan continued, Big brother, didn't you ask me what the myriad world seal is and what an explorer is? Wang Yi nodded slightly when he heard that. He had indeed asked about it just now, but because he was distracted by the situation in China, and Lu Yanyan had not answered his questions then, he did not take it to heart. Now that Lu Yanyan had suddenly mentioned it, Wang Yi already had a vague guess in his heart. However, there were still some key points that he could not figure out for the time being. Despite this, since Lu Yanyan was prepared to tell him, he did not mind learning more about these things in detail. Wang Yi did not speak. He reached out his hand, indicating that he was ready to listen. Lu Yan nodded slightly and continued, after the god of war, Wang Wei, and a few eminent monks deduced the limit of 20 years, they were unwilling to accept the tragic outcome of only being able to live for 20 years. The powerhouses agreed to look for an opportunity to break out of the situation. After a few days of searching, the god of war, Wang Wei, finally found the divine artifact, the Myriad World Seal, in Prince Gong's mansion at the capital. Wang Yi involuntarily raised his eyebrows when he heard this. He couldn't help but feel suspicious. It was Prince Gong's mansion again. Could there be such a coincidence? It had to be known that the origin of martial arts in this world was also because of the huge explosion in Prince Gong's mansion, which led to the revival of spirit qi and the rise of martial arts. In that case, was there some special connection between the two? However, as there were no direct hints and only limited clues, Wang Yi could not make a judgment immediately. Lu Yanyan continued, after the god of war, Wang Wei, brought back the Myriad World Seal, he joined forces with a few eminent monks to deduce the limit again. In the end, he came to an extremely shocking conclusion. There are countless parallel worlds in this universe. Meanwhile, the Myriad World Seal is the central node that carries and connects the various parallel worlds. Furthermore, with the Myriad World Seal, we have a chance to transmigrate. Wang Yi suddenly felt a little dumbfounded. He couldn't help but ask, are transmigrators so worthless now? Has planet Earth already formed a transmigration army and colonized various parallel worlds? Lu Yanyan shook her head helplessly and said with a bitter smile, Big brother, you're thinking too much. How can it be so easy to transmigrate? If I want to use the Myriad World Seal to transmigrate to other worlds, I have to be able to resonate with it. Furthermore, this is only the first condition. It doesn't mean that you can definitely transmigrate just by resonating. You still need to experience a near-death experience with a 10% chance of survival. Wang Yi came to a realization. If that were the case, it would make sense. It was not that he was happy to see the people of China experience a near-death situation. However, how could something as heaven-defying as transmigration be done without paying any price? Take Wang Yi for example. Although he had only taken a nap and transmigrated, he had not experienced any pain or death. However, being able to transmigrate through worlds and be reborn should also come at the price of death in his previous life. Wang Yi thought for a moment before asking, a 10% chance of survival? Is the death rate so high? Lu Yanyan shook her head again and said with a bitter smile, High. Big brother, the death rate is much higher than this. After deducing that one can transmigrate through worlds using the Myriad World Seal, we made a deduction based on the data of missing and dead people from the past few years. Again, we have come to the terrible conclusion that transmigrators existed years ago. Because of this, under the call of the god of war Wang Wei, a few eminent monks, and the entire country worked together and tested who could resonate with the Myriad World Seal as quickly as possible. In the end, among the half of people in China who survived, a total of 1 million people could resonate with the Myriad World Seal. Big brother, do you know how many of the 1 million people have successfully transmigrated? Wang Yi shook his head slightly when he heard that. He was indeed not sure. Moreover, he did not want to speculate after seeing her expression. He did not dare to speculate either. Lu Yanyan stretched out 5 fingers, her expression slightly distorted. She said in pain, I'm the fifth one who successfully transmigrated. The million of us are called explorers. We were divided into 10 batches to use the Myriad Realm Seal. Each batch consists of 100,000 people. I was assigned to the 5th batch. When Wang Yi heard this, his eyelid could not help but twitch. He almost instantly understood what she meant and finally understood just how terrifying the death ratio was. However, Wang Yi did not interrupt her and continued to listen. However, there was a hint of pity in his eyes. Of course, it was not the kind of pity shown between a man and a woman. Lu Yanyan naturally did not notice Wang Yi's abnormality. She continued slowly, furthermore, our main goal and most important responsibility are to work hard to find a way to resolve the crisis on planet Earth. Whether it's to allow us to have powerful martial strength, to find a strong person to rely on, or to find a fellow countryman who transmigrated from planet Earth and is doing well, the ultimate goal is to be able to deal with the great enemy of planet Earth. Moreover, we all had the same idea. In the end, of the first 100,000 explorers, only one succeeded in transmigrating. The rest were turned to ashes on the spot. As for the second and third batch of explorers, it was even worse. None of them succeeded in transmigrating. Meanwhile, 3 people from the 4th batch succeeded. As for the 5th batch, the one that I was in, only I managed to successfully transmigrate. I'm not sure what happened after that. At this point, it was obvious that something was wrong with Lu Yanyan's emotions. Wang Yi reached out and pressed on her shoulder, comforting her softly, "It's been hard on you." When Lu Yanyan heard this, she became even more agitated. She seemed to be crying and smiling at the same time. The expression on her face was complicated and unfathomable. Lu Yanyan shook her head desperately and denied loudly, "It hasn't been hard. It hasn't been hard on us, really. Big brother, do you know? There were too many enemies that suddenly descended that day. There were so many that even if the god of war Wang Wei appeared out of nowhere, and even if countless experts attacked one after another, there would still be an endless stream of enemies. In places where the experts can't protect, many people were saved by warriors without any cultivation. Furthermore, my family and I are among the people who were saved. Big brother, can you imagine? The youngest of those warriors are only 17 or 18 years old. They're not even as old as my younger brother. They're just children. They're the apple of their parents' eyes. However, they protected us with their flesh and blood. I'll never forget that little warrior with his bloody face and silly smile who comforted us and said we'd be safe with him." Wang Yi's emotions seemed to have followed Lu Yanyan's words and floated directly to the battlefield that was filled with blood and killing. He seemed to see fearless warriors blocking the young god race's advance with their bodies in order to protect the safety of the people behind them. At this moment, Lu Yanyan's eyes were already covered with tears. She was on the verge of losing control of her emotions again. She subconsciously tightened her grip on Wang Yi's arm. She even shouted hysterically, "Our family was saved, but dozens of warriors were sacrificed to save us." I asked the warriors who survived. I asked them if it was worth sacrificing so many people to save just a few of us. Big brother, guess what he said? Guess what he said? Wang Yi could already sense that Lu Yanyan's mind was on the verge of collapse again. He hurriedly pointed out and injected a wisp of spiritual power into the space between her eyebrows. It was indeed effective. Lu Yanyan's madness gradually subsided and she let go of his arm that she had been gripping tightly. However, she continued, "When that warrior heard my question, he simply shook his head slightly and smiled at me. He said that it was definitely worth it because that was their mission, even if it meant losing his life. Therefore, on the day we used the Myriad World Seal, none of us chose to quit, whether it was the god of war Wang Wei, the few eminent monks, or the higher-ups of the country. Even when we couldn't bear to see such a high death rate and wanted to give up, none of us retreated. As the warrior said, it's also our mission. To be honest, I was really scared when I saw that only 1 in 100,000 people could successfully cross over. However, I'm willing to use my life to fight for a ray of hope for this country and for these people. I will fight for a wisp of light and a thread of hope in this dark and hopeless future." Lu Yanyan's mental state was obviously much better after saying everything that had been hidden in her heart, as well as with the help of Wang Yi's spiritual power. At this moment, Wang Yi had more or less understood the current situation on planet Earth. To put it bluntly, they were struggling at death's door, relying on the lives of those who had achieved success in their cultivation to survive. Wait, once again, Wang Yi suddenly realized that something was amiss and subconsciously asked, "The Myriad World Seal is still on planet Earth. How can you return from this world?" Lu Yanyan naturally knew what Wang Yi was worried about. She chuckled and said, "Big brother, you don't have to worry about this. Before we transmigrated to this world, the god of war Wang Wei once said that the Myriad World Seal has already left a mark on us. Regardless of whether we find a powerful force in a parallel world or not, the Myriad World Seal will open again in 20 years to guide us back. This is the passive way of returning. There's also a way to return to planet Earth on our own. An eminent monk once deduced that as long as a land immortal level powerhouse makes a move, they can use the mark on our bodies to directly open the passage to planet Earth." Wang Yi raised his eyebrows and suddenly asked, "Did that eminent monk say what realm the land immortal is at?" Lu Yanyan shook her head gently and said helplessly, "No, that eminent monk expressed it very vaguely. He said that that realm can only be understood but not explained. Only by becoming a land immortal can one know what kind of realm it is." Wang Yi couldn't help but feel a little helpless. He hated these mysterious words that required one to understand them on their own the most. However, according to Lu Yanyan, Wang Yi had a rough idea of the situation on planet Earth. He couldn't passively wait for 20 years before the Myriad World Seal brought him back. What he needed to do now was to seize the time to increase his strength and strive to reach the so-called land immortal realm as soon as possible. Then, through the mark on Lu Yanyan's body, he would open the way back to planet Earth. First, it was to prevent any accidents from happening. No one knew what else the young god race would do. They might have a method or a powerful existence that could break the array. Second, it was for those who had succeeded in supporting the array formation. The earlier they returned, the more people would be able to survive. Otherwise, if they really waited 20 years before returning, those who had succeeded in their cultivation would probably have died long ago. Since the goal had been set, Wang Yi needed to discuss with Lu Yanyan how to complete this goal. After all, Lu Yanyan knew the situation on planet Earth the best. She had the most say in some things. However, before that, Wang Yi asked something else. By right, you should be very busy at such a tight time. Why do you still have the time to magically modify The Legend of the White Snake and open a winery? This was completely due to Wang Yi's curiosity. It was a curiosity that had arisen after he saw that Fa Hai had become Xu Xian's father. However, when he looked at Lu Yanyan again, her expression immediately darkened. Her eyes were filled with bitterness as she let out a long sigh and said, "Big brother, I didn't want to either. When I successfully transmigrated, I found out that this is a martial arts world and that martial artists have terrifying abilities that can destroy the world. Thus, I wanted to work hard to cultivate and become stronger. But for some reason, I only sensed the so-called spiritual energy, but I couldn't cultivate at all. In the end, I could only settle for the next best thing. I thought of a way to earn money and accumulate a huge amount of wealth to hire powerful martial artists. In 20 years, they will return to planet Earth with me to support China." At this point, Lu Yanyan couldn't help but shake her head with a bitter smile. Then, she continued, "Unfortunately, after so long, I didn't save much money through the modification of The Legend of the White Snake. It was barely enough to open a winery. I'm too far away from being able to hire powerful martial artists. Just when I was beginning to despair and couldn't see my way forward, I didn't expect you to appear, big brother." At this point, Lu Yanyan suddenly looked at Wang Yi, her eyes filled with passion and excitement. She could not help but grab Wang Yi's arm again and continued enthusiastically, "Big brother, you'll return to planet Earth with me to support China, right?" After saying that, Lu Yanyan did not loosen her grip. Instead, she tightened her grip and stared at Wang Yi nervously, as if she was afraid that he would reject her. Wang Yi couldn't help but be speechless when he saw this. He reached out his other hand and rubbed Lu Yanyan's head. He smiled and said, "If I wasn't willing to return to planet Earth to support China, why would I have said so much to you? What we need to do next is to plan how to provide support and come up with a detailed plan." After saying that, Wang Yi's spiritual power surged out and enveloped Lu Yanyan. It was only then that he realized that although Lu Yanyan was standing there, she seemed out of place in this world, like a crane standing alone. Her body did not show any signs of being tempered by spiritual energy. The entire world, the heavens, and even the human race's destiny were rejecting her. It was only at this moment that Wang Yi realized that unlike him, Lu Yanyan's body had transmigrated directly to this world. She did not have the aura or the origin of this world. This was probably the reason why she was not recognized by the world and was rejected everywhere. Yes. Meanwhile, Lu Yanyan nodded slightly upon hearing Wang Yi's words, unable to hide her excitement. To be honest, she was indeed afraid that Wang Yi would not agree to return to planet Earth with her. After all, Wang Yi had never experienced the great calamity in those days of darkness and despair. It was impossible for him to understand that pain and suffering, blood and sorrow, nor could he resonate with it. Moreover, humans had a selfish side to them. With Wang Yi's current status in this world, he could have enjoyed the high and mighty life of being in charge of killing people and lying drunk on a beauty's lap. He had every reason and every possibility to refuse. Before discussing the specific plan, Wang Yi suddenly thought of something very important. With a casual wave of his hand, an image was directly formed by his true chi. The content of the image was Elder Golden Horn whom he had killed previously. Wang Yi also needed to confirm if it was the young god race that had invaded planet Earth. If it wasn't, it would be awkward. Furthermore, some of the preparations and plans that he had made previously also needed to be changed. Ah, it's a disaster-level creature. The image had just condensed when Lu Yanyan's face was instantly filled with fear. She covered her head with her hands and couldn't help but cry out. When Wang Yi saw this, he quickly dispelled the image in front of them and comforted her for a long time. Only then did Lu Yanyan believe that this was not true. At this moment, Wang Yi was almost certain that the young god race had invaded planet Earth. However, he still needed to confirm what level a Conate Realm young god race expert belonged to on planet Earth so that he could have a clear idea. Thinking of this, Wang Yi simply asked, what realm does this so-called disaster-level creature belong to on planet Earth? Although Lu Yanyan's emotions had returned to normal, her expression still couldn't help but change when she heard the words, disaster-level creature. After pondering for a moment, he slowly said, disaster-level creatures are second only to the highest-leveled creatures among the enemies who invaded planet Earth. Their combat strength is similar to the god of war Wang Wei, and a few other eminent monks. They can directly ignore human wave attacks and all the high-tech weapons on planet Earth. As for the creatures of the highest level, they only appeared when the array was just activated. They worked together to break the array, but they didn't succeed. After they failed, they simply chose to leave. We never saw them again. Wang Yi nodded slightly. He had a rough idea of the Yang God race that had invaded planet Earth. There were definitely Yang God experts at the Conate realm. Furthermore, to be able to compete with creatures in this realm, it could be imagined that those human experts should also be in the Conate realm. However, it was impossible to determine what level of the Conate realm they were at. Furthermore, they were only considered to be at the second highest level. There were still the highest leveled beings who were above the Conate realm. Wang Yi estimated that these so-called highest leveled beings should have already surpassed the Conate realm, and they should be the biggest trouble that planet Earth was facing. As for whether this realm was the land immortal realm, no one knew. Wang Yi's first goal now was to raise his cultivation level to the Conate realm. At that time, even if he could not break through to the land immortal realm, at the very least, when he returned to planet Earth in 20 years, he would have invincible combat strength comparable to the highest leveled members of the Yang God race. Of course, the most important goal was still to break through to the Conate realm as soon as possible. Compared to waiting passively, Wang Yi was more willing to take the initiative and take control of his fate. In the following period of time, Wang Yi and Lu Yanyan came up with a detailed plan for the future. Actually, most of the time, Lu Yanyan was the one talking while Wang Yi was just listening. It had to be said that Lu Yanyan was indeed a genius. She had some good ideas. Their plan was actually very simple. On the one hand, Wang Yi was the leader. What he needed to do was to desperately increase his strength. On the other hand, he needed to establish his own team and rope in enough experts. At that time, he would directly lead an endless army of experts back to planet Earth. Speaking of winning against the strong, Wang Yi immediately recalled the urge to spread martial arts throughout the world and establish a martial arts system for this world. What better way to win over the strong than to establish a sect and spread martial arts to the world? In fact, there was no need to establish a faction at all. As long as Wang Yi raised his arm and shouted, countless experts would be willing to fight for him. The two of them discussed how to pass on Wang Yi's martial arts for a long time. Only after Wang Yi said that he had the Skynet network that could cover the entire world did Lu Yanyan's solo show begin. According to Lu Yanyan, China did indeed have hidden technological means. They had already developed a bio-optical computer many years ago, and it had been updated countless generations ago. After gathering all the explorers, the country implanted bio-optical computers into everyone's brains. The bio-optical computer stored almost all of China's cultural heritage and technological methods. There was even more than that. Almost everything that could be imagined and even the unimaginable was stored in the bio-optical computers. It was to let the explorers have the capital to rise in the other worlds. However, it was a pity that Lu Yanyan had transmigrated to the world of martial Dao. Furthermore, there was a crisis of the beasts outside the city. This was why Lu Yanyan, an explorer with the wisdom of the entire China, was in such a miserable state in this world. There were really some methods that could not be used at all. Some methods simply could not be used because she did not have enough funds. Back to business, Lu Yanyan needed Wang Yi to fork out a large amount of money. With the technology in the bio-optical computer, she could create a large number of smartphones in an extremely short period of time. This was actually not troublesome. With the current level of technology, they only needed to slightly change the process of making cell phones to achieve mass production of smartphones. Moreover, this was only the beginning. As everything was laid out, Lu Yanyan would update the smartphones one after another. She could even produce communication wristbands that could display virtual figures. Then, she would use the source code of short video software and transform it into a platform for martial arts through the bio-optic computer. Then, the first step was to use Wang Yi's influence to distribute smartphones and the short video platform used to spread martial arts across the entire Langyu domain. They would strive for martial arts to be known to everyone, be it martial artists or ordinary people. The second step still required Wang Yi's influence. As a connate venerable, he would endorse smartphones and the short video platform. Of course, the effects would be even better if he could invite Venerable Ning Jing, the ruler of the Langya domain, along. Meanwhile, the third step required Wang Yi to record videos and share them on the short video platforms so that those martial artists could truly taste the benefits. As for deepening Wang Yi's influence in the hearts of martial artists, this depended on publicity and public opinion. It needed to be slowly implemented according to the situation. The remaining plans would be left for later. These plans needed Wang Yi's strength to improve before they could be realized. At that time, he would walk out of the Langya domain and the capital to face the entire country. He would spread the short video platform all over China and become a true martial ancestor. Wang Yi was an impatient person. Since he had already formulated a detailed plan, he was naturally unwilling to wait any longer. After all, what he lacked the most now was time. Furthermore, the person who would be most helpful to their plan would definitely be Venerable Ning Jing. After contacting Venerable Ning Jing through the Skynet, Wang Yi directly activated the spatial passageway. Looking at the circular passageway formed by the rapid rotation of light particles in front of her, Lu Yanyan was clearly stunned. Her face was filled with disbelief. She reached out to cover her red lips and couldn't help but exclaim, "Are you Dr. Strange? Is that the light particle teleportation gate?" Wang Yi shook his head and chuckled. "This is just a martial arts secret technique. I call it the Heaven and Earth Gate." With that, Wang Yi simply pulled Lu Yanyan into the spatial passageway and they instantly disappeared from the winery. In the meeting hall of the Venerable Palace, Venerable Ning Jing stared at Wang Yi with bright eyes. Then, she smiled and said, "It's only been a few days and fellow Taoist Wang has returned. Could it be that you've missed me?" However, no one knew if she was joking or if she meant something else. When Wang Yi heard this, he felt black lines slip down his forehead as a flock of crows flew past his head. He said helplessly, "Fellow Taoist Ning Jing, stop joking. I have something to ask of you." Then, as if he had thought of something, he explained again, "This is Lu Yanyan, a friend I trust very much and also my partner." When Venerable Ning Jing heard this, she looked at Lu Yanyan, who was behind Wang Yi, and her expression immediately became interesting. With her sixth sense as a woman, she knew that the relationship between the two of them was definitely not as simple as Wang Yi said. As if standing up for her sister Xia, Venerable Ning Jing said with a faint smile and a strange tone, "Friend. Partner." Wang Yi knew that Venerable Ning Jing must have misunderstood, but since they were talking about serious matters, he was in no hurry to explain. After he explained the purpose of this trip, Venerable Ning Jing would understand. At the thought of this, Wang Yi's expression immediately became extremely serious. He said very seriously, "I want to teach martial arts." Boom! Wang Yi's voice seemed to turn into thunder that exploded in Venerable Ning Jing's mind. Venerable Ning Jing knew better than anyone how important these words were. Wang Yi now had the title of a venerable and indeed had the combat strength of a venerable. However, what couldn't be ignored was that Wang Yi's true realm was only at the Grandmaster realm. The reason why he could have his current identity and strength was because of his unique martial arts. However, now that Wang Yi actually said that he wanted to teach martial arts, no one would be able to remain calm and maintain their composure. However, in order to ensure that nothing went wrong, Venerable Ning Jing still asked, "Fellow Taoist Wang, what do you mean?" Wang Yi shrugged and said matter-of-factly, "I'm prepared to spread my cultivation techniques to the human race so that the human martial artists can cultivate them." After receiving Wang Yi's affirmation, Venerable Ning Jing could no longer remain calm. At the same time, she started to doubt her sixth sense. She did not believe that Wang Yi would leave his legitimate wife alone at such a big event and bring a concubine instead. Venerable Ning Jing was a little embarrassed, but she could not reject such a good thing that benefited the country and the people. She could only cup her fists and say, "Fellow Taoist Wang is righteous. I admire you." As soon as she finished speaking, Venerable Ning Jing recalled what Wang Yi had said previously. She could not help but ask curiously, "I wonder if fellow Taoist Wang needs my help." When Wang Yi heard this, he directly pushed Lu Yanyan out from behind him. Then, he smiled and said, "We'll leave the professional matters to the professional." To be honest, ever since she arrived at the Venerable Palace, Lu Yanyan had been in a daze. She had already tried her best to overestimate Wang Yi's influence in this world, but she never expected him to give her such a big surprise. After all, this person was the ruler of the Lengyu domain. If they were in ancient times, she would be equivalent to a high-ranking official of the territory, a being like a local emperor. However, who would have thought that this person, who was also from planet Earth, had already reached the top of the pyramid not long after transmigrating? In comparison, Lu Yanyan was indeed living a miserable life. She felt that she could not live up to her identity as an explorer. Lu Yanyan couldn't help but feel a little helpless. Indeed, comparisons were odious. Their ancestors were right. Although her mental state was a little broken, Lu Yanyan was even more confident in their previous martial arts plan. In fact, Lu Yanyan was even thinking that it did not matter even if they didn't achieve anything in the end. As long as the Myriad World Seal opened the passageway 20 years later, Wang Yi would be able to follow her back and kidnap Venerable Ning Jing along with her. Then, she would have completed her mission. Seeing that Lu Yanyan was standing there without saying anything and just smiling foolishly, Wang Yi felt embarrassed. He could not help but pat her shoulder and remind her softly, "Stop laughing. Quickly tell fellow Taoist Ning Jing about the plan we discussed previously." Only then did Lu Yanyan realize that she had lost her composure. She cried out in surprise, and her pretty face instantly turned red to the ears. However, this concerned the life and death of countless people in China, after all. Thus, Lu Yanyan adjusted her mentality almost instantly and her expression returned to normal. After organizing her words, Lu Yanyan was very natural and at ease. She simply told Venerable Ning Jing about the plan to make smartphones and a short video platform to teach martial arts. After hearing this, Venerable Ning Jing felt that her worldview had been refreshed once again. If Lu Yanyan had not come with Wang Yi, Venerable Ning Jing would definitely have thought that she was talking nonsense. However, because of this, Venerable Ning Jing's sixth sense was completely overturned. There was definitely nothing special between the two of them. This woman called Lu Yanyan was definitely a genius. She was a super genius in the technology field. With Wang Yi's shocking actions, it was not difficult for Venerable Ning Jing to accept it. Venerable Ning Jing was also a decisive person. After knowing her role in the plan, she directly gave an order to her subordinates without hesitation. She ordered them to purchase smartphone manufacturing factories in their respective giant cities. To be honest, the Guardians were stunned when they heard this order. They did not know why a dignified venerable would personally issue a venerable order for such a trivial matter. However, this was an order from the venerable after all. No matter how puzzled they were, they still had to carry it out. All the giant cities under Lengyu County City instantly became busy on this day. Be it big or small, as long as it was a smartphone manufacturing factory, it was bought by the Guardians' residents at a price several times higher than the market price. Then, the three of them discussed the plan again. From production to distribution, as well as the construction of the short video platform, everything would be done in about 10 days. After agreeing on a time with the two of them, Wang Yi left a technical talent like Lu Yanyan in Lengyu County City and left through the spatial passageway. After all, there was nothing he could do to help by staying here. Besides, there were still many key problems that he needed to solve. However, before Wang Yi left, he mentioned that he needed to borrow Wu Shuang for a period of time. Venerable Ning Jing naturally had no objections to this. One had to know that Wu Shuang's current realm was definitely thanks to Wang Yi's help. Now that fellow Taoist Wang wanted to borrow Wu Shuang temporarily, this was very likely Wu Shuang's opportunity. The spatial passageway gradually disappeared, and Wang Yi brought Wu Shuang back to the Dukong Winery in Kang City. As soon as he returned to Kang City, Wang Yi called Fang Yuan and asked him to bring Fang Ming's, Tang Zhenyu, and the Shu family's head, Shu Liancheng, to see him. The few of them naturally did not dare to neglect Wang Yi's order. Before long, they had all gathered in the winery. Everyone sat in a circle and looked at each other. No one knew why Wang Yi had suddenly called them here, including Wu Shuang. Wang Yi swept his gaze across the room and saw everyone's expressions. Then, he said with a faint smile, "I called you here because I need you to do something." Seeing that Wang Yi had started to talk about serious matters, the few of them instantly became serious. They bowed slightly and said in unison, "We are honored. Please instruct us." When Wang Yi heard this, he shook his head and smiled. "There's no hurry. Before that, I'll give you some opportunities." Actually, Wang Yi's idea was very simple. He needed to nurture a group of experts who cultivated his style of martial arts. After all, he still had to focus on improving his strength in the future. He couldn't always teach martial arts by himself. He didn't have the time at all. These experts that he had nurtured would help him spread his martial arts through the short video platform or by traveling to the various giant cities. As for Wang Yi, he would occasionally appear on the short video platform. These videos could be recorded in advance and would not affect his cultivation. As for why Wang Yi chose the few people present, it was because he had a good relationship with them and was very familiar with them. He did not want to let the good things he had created go to outsiders. Second, these people had more or less comprehended a wisp of his martial will. When they cultivated his cultivation techniques, they would definitely achieve twice the result with half the effort. For a moment, the few of them were very dizzy from the sudden surprise. It had to be known that the opportunity that this person had given them was a true opportunity that could change their fate and allow them to soar into the sky. Shu Liancheng was undoubtedly the most excited person, but he knew his limits. Since he was able to appear in front of the Lord Venerable at the same time as these people, it must be because the pledge of allegiance he had offered to the Su family previously had worked. Wang Yi did not waste any time. He pointed his finger and directly imprinted his cultivation techniques into their spiritual space. Then, he waved his hand again. Endless power of the world seemed to be attracted by an inexplicable force and instantly gathered into a special space, enveloping everyone. Coincidentally, because Wang Yi had raised the connate purple golden red gourd visualization technique to level 13, he had regained control of the power of the world in advance. However, not long after he regained control of the power of the world, he lost control of it again because he built a special Tao comprehension space for these people. Despite that, the few of them did not disappoint Wang Yi. As time passed, when they walked out of the special Tao comprehension space, their cultivation techniques greatly improved. Even Shu Liancheng, who had the weakest talent, had raised the Dragon Elephant Wisdom technique to level 2. As for Fang Ming's and Wu Shuang, they were the most stunning. Wu Shuang specialized in the Tao and directly raised the Dragon Elephant Wisdom technique to level -7. Her physical strength had already reached a shocking level. As for Fang Ming's, his Dragon Elephant Wisdom technique, Nine Suns Divine Art, and the Little Leaf Flying Saber technique had all stepped into level -4. His martial arts realm had also successfully advanced to the peak of rank 5. His combat strength was so terrifying that he could definitely fight against a peak-leveled battle warrior rank martial artist. As for whether he could fight against a grandmaster, it was unknown. Meanwhile, Fang Yuan and Tang Zhenyu were a little mediocre. Fang Yuan had only cultivated the Little Leaf Flying Dagger technique to level -4. Tang Zhenyu was similar. He had also cultivated the Nine Suns Divine Art to level -4. The only difference was that he had only just entered level -4. Although it was standard, the increase in the combat strength of these two people was still extremely terrifying. It could be said that the few people present were the prototypes of Wang Yi's martial arts plan. They sensed the divine techniques in their spiritual space that almost seemed to point to the source of martial arts. Only then did they realize what kind of heaven-defying opportunity Wang Yi had given them. Without any hesitation, the few of them bowed respectfully to Wang Yi and said, "Thank you for bestowing us with your divine techniques. Whatever you say, sir, we'll do it." At this moment, Fang Mingzi's thoughts were different from everyone else's. He was both excited and afraid. To others, this opportunity would only increase their strength and at most widen their path in martial arts. However, it was different for Fang Ming's. He was excited because Wang Yi had previously promised that as long as he could cultivate the Dragon Elephant Wisdom technique to level 3 within a year, he would take him in as his disciple. However, what terrified him was that he had only broken through to level 4 of the cultivation technique because of this shortcut. Even Fang Ming's could not tell if Wang Yi would still accept him as his disciple under such circumstances. It was no wonder Fang Ming's was so worried. After all, he had worked so hard for so long to become Wang Yi's disciple. However, if he could not become a disciple because of a sudden opportunity, he would really be extremely unlucky. Of course, Fang Ming's had also calculated that the probability of this happening was not very high. It could even be said that it did not exist. With Wang Yi's status, he could have just said that he did not want to take him in as a disciple. There was no need to go through so much trouble. Seeing how serious everyone was, Wang Yi couldn't help but shake his head and smile. "It's not as serious as you say." Then, he explained his plan and what he needed them to do. When they heard this, their expressions changed completely when they looked at Wang Yi again. Their gaze no longer contained the reverence for Venerable, nor the gratitude for giving opportunities. Instead, in their eyes, Wang Yi was like an ancient sage. He had no selfish motives and did everything for the human race. He watched to teach martial arts. He wanted to spread his martial arts to the world. He wasn't just all talk. Not everyone had this kind of boldness. Just the risk that Wang Yi had to take was enough, let alone how precious these divine techniques were. This was equivalent to presenting his martial arts to everyone without holding back, allowing others to peel it open and study it in depth. If someone with ulterior motives obtained his martial arts, it was very likely to cause fatal damage to Wang Yi. Furthermore, if these cultivation techniques were obtained by the foreign races, it was very likely that they would find the weakness of Wang Yi's martial arts and develop a great offensive technique that targeted him. Wang Yi naturally did not know what they were thinking, but even if he did, it did not matter. Now that the path ahead was clear, he could advance to the Conate realm and cultivate the powerful Conate realm techniques. After all, he had perfected all of his divine techniques. Moreover, Wang Yi also had a premonition that he was not far from breaking through to the Conate realm. Wang Yi pondered for a moment and seemed to have thought of something. Then, he smiled at Fang Yuan and said, "There's something else I need you to do." Upon hearing this, Fang Yuan immediately replied, "Please instruct me, sir." Wang Yi nodded slightly and continued, "Go and inform those martial artists who are comprehending the Venerable Order. As long as they can comprehend the martial will I left behind within 10 days, they can come and see me. At the same time, they can cultivate my martial arts." Fang Yuan bowed slightly. He naturally understood what Wang Yi meant. Since the serious matters had been discussed, Wang Yi still had many things to do. He asked the few of them to go back and agreed to meet at his villa in 10 days. As for Wu Shuang, who had nowhere to go for the time being, Wang Yi simply brought her home. After all, she had a good relationship with Su Xia. When the two of them returned to the villa, Su Xia and Hua Changyan were still reading The Legend of the White Snake with relish. Seeing Wu Shuang's sudden appearance, Su Xia was naturally exceptionally happy. She pulled Hua Changyan and introduced the two of them to each other. The entire Langya domain seemed to have experienced a shocking earthquake on this day. A piece of news instantly spread to all the huge cities with Kang City as the center, including Langya County City. The mysterious Venerable, Jinlin Guoshi, had appeared in Kang City. After comprehending the martial will of the Venerable, one could meet the Venerable in the morning and cultivate the martial Tao of the Venerable. For a moment, there was a commotion. All the gazes of the major powers were focused on Kang City. Countless martial artists, regardless of their strength, all moved toward Kang City. Everyone had their own selfish desires. Who could resist the temptation of becoming a Venerable's disciple and cultivating the martial arts of a Venerable? Wang Yi naturally did not have the time to pay too much attention to this. There was still a very important matter that he had to settle. One had to know that the cultivation techniques he cultivated were too heaven-defying, and their requirements for martial artists were too high. Take Fang Ming's for example. Even with his aptitude, he had to advance to the battle warrior rank before he could adapt to the cultivation intensity at level 1 of Wang Yi's cultivation technique. What Wang Yi needed to do was to dismantle and simplify level 1 of the cultivation techniques to the extent that ordinary people could cultivate them. If this crucial problem was not resolved, then spreading his martial arts to the world would become empty talk. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, 9 days had passed. This was the longest Wang Yi had been in seclusion since he came to this world. Other than spending time with Su Xia, he had been increasing his cultivation level while dismantling and simplifying his cultivation techniques. However, he had indeed gained a lot this time. He raised the remaining cultivation techniques to the peak of level 12. At the same time, he also perfectly disassembled and simplified the 10 forms of Dragon Elephant, the 10 forms of Nine Suns, and the 10 forms of Little Li. Actually, dismantling and simplifying a cultivation technique could be solved by using the directional sign-in. However, Wang Yi felt that it was a waste of sign-in opportunities, so he simply chose to do it himself. It was obvious that the effects were not bad. With Wang Yi's current strength and realm, it was not difficult at all. It had to be said that Wang Yi had been infected by the system's useless naming. Just like the pills given by the system, the simplified cultivation techniques that he had just deduced simply used the first 2 words of their previous form. To be honest, Wang Yi was quite satisfied with the 3 simplified cultivation techniques that he had deduced. According to his estimation, as long as one was not stupid and had some cultivation aptitude, they would be able to master these techniques in a month or 2. If it was someone with heaven-defying aptitude, they would probably take at most 3 to 5 days to cultivate these techniques to perfection. This is from the SoundStories Audiobook YouTube channel. As long as one cultivated the simplified cultivation technique to perfection, it would be equivalent to reaching level 1 of the original cultivation technique. Their martial arts cultivation would also successfully break through to the battle soldier rank and reach rank -1. At that time, their body would be able to adapt to the cultivation intensity of the original cultivation technique. This was definitely an epic-making product. It was enough to shock the entire world of martial arts in China. As long as it could be popularized among the people, it was not a problem for the number of ranked martial artists to be thousands of times higher than now. After all, not everyone was on the path of martial arts. Some ordinary people with ordinary aptitude and family conditions could not afford to nurture martial artists. Most importantly, the cycle of advancement was too long. This was because one could not even cultivate the stance technique before entering the 9-rank system. They could only exercise to temper their bodies and eat food that contained rich spiritual energy as support. Basically, those who came from relatively wealthy families and had children with good qualifications would have to nurture their children for about 5 to 6 years before they could enter the 9-rank system. On the contrary, if one could not provide their children with ingredients that contained spiritual energy from a young age and the child's aptitude was ordinary, it would be fortunate if they could advance before the age of 30. Basically, as long as one was unable to advance in martial arts before the age of 30, it meant that this person would never be able to achieve anything in martial arts. Currently, the most common people in the human race were ordinary people with ordinary aptitudes who could not afford spiritual energy materials. In the end, they would be ordinary people who could not advance in their martial arts even after reaching the age of 30. The simplified cultivation techniques that Wang Yi had produced perfectly resolved these problems. From now on, there would no longer be any restrictions on cultivating the martial Tao. Regardless of age or aptitude, as long as one had the talent to practice martial arts, one could choose to step onto the path of martial arts and definitely become a ranked martial artist. The only difference was the length of time needed. Venerable Ning Jing had accepted Wang Yi's instructions, and the various guardians' residences in the various giant cities worked together to produce and promote the goods. In the same 9 days, news of the launch of the smartphone and the short video platform swept through the entire Langya domain like a hurricane. It was even mentioned in the news that at that time, Venerable Ning Jing and the mysterious Venerable Jinlin Guoshi would personally appear on the short video platform to preach the Tao to everyone. Now, everyone knew about this. Although such high-tech technology was unheard of, this did not stop people from looking forward to it. After all, this was an opportunity to listen to venerables teach martial arts. No one could refuse this temptation. As for the current Kang City, based on the flow of experts, it was no weaker than Langya County City. It was truly crowded. From battle warrior rank martial artists who had just entered Level 1, to top grandmasters who had completed the qualitative changes in their strength, they were all gathered in Kang City. They were all there to find their own opportunities. If they were able to comprehend a wisp of martial will from the Venerable Order, they would be able to receive the Lord Venerable's favor and have the chance to cultivate a venerable level martial arts technique. Meanwhile, Fang Yuan saw that more and more experts were gathering outside the Guardian's residence and there were many signs of it being overcrowded. He made a prompt decision and placed the remaining 2 venerable orders on the martial arts stage in the Department of Finance. Only then did the massive crowd split into 3 parts. However, even so, it was still very crowded. Fortunately, Wang Yi had left behind the words, "Stop it." Otherwise, with so many experts crowding together, it would be inevitable for a conflict to break out. In the underground warehouse of the Yonghua Chamber of Commerce, Fu Enji sat paralyzed in the corner. His face was gloomy, and there seemed to be endless anger burning in his eyes. He stared at the sloppy and burly man with a full beard in front of him. His voice roared with despair and defiance. "It can't be, it can't be, you must be lying to me." After saying that, he placed both hands on the ground and tried to stand up. Unfortunately, he failed after struggling several times. In the end, he could only fall weakly to the ground again. Meanwhile, Lord Wuqing seemed to enjoy admiring the anger and despair of others. He stared at Fu Enji with interest for a long time. Then, he said disdainfully, "What a joke. You have no value now. Why should I lie to you? Do you know why I found you the day your wife died? Didn't I promise you that as long as you take out that thing, I will revive your wife? That's because your wife is of the same race as me. However, she betrayed her race because of a piece of trash like you, and hid the important token that led my race here. Did you think that you could sit back and reap the benefits after inviting an expert to Tantra City? You probably don't know that there was just an offering that I tacitly allowed you to let in." Upon hearing this, Fu Enji felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His wife's words when she handed that thing to him on her deathbed surfaced in his mind. "Enji, you must hide this thing well. No matter who offers you anything, you are not allowed to take it out. This concerns the survival of this world." Other than Fu Enji himself, no one else knew those words. Furthermore, this unkempt man in front of him could actually point out this key point, so the outcome was already obvious. It was very likely that his wife was really from a foreign race. Lord Wu Qing seemed to have already won and wanted to vent the pride in his heart. He did not mind revealing more information. He laughed proudly and arrogantly. "Actually, even with the token in my hands, I'm not 100% confident of succeeding. Speaking of which, I have to thank that venerable Jinlin Guoshi for gathering so many powerful sacrifices in Kang City. This is good. As long as we sacrifice them, our race will definitely be able to successfully descend to this world." At this point, Lord Wu Qing suddenly changed the topic and said with a sinister smile, "But don't worry, I won't go back on my word. As long as the experts of our race descend, I will definitely revive your wife and let her accept the judgment of our race." Ha ha ha. After saying that, Lord Wu Qing laughed wildly. On the other hand, Fu Enji was paralyzed. His head was lowered, filled with dejection and regret. If he could, he would rather die than come into contact with this demon who claimed to be able to revive his wife. If it was possible, he would rather give that thing to that person in Tantra City and not dream of reviving his wife. But now, because of his selfishness, the human race was in danger. Lord Wu Qing seemed to have lost interest in the conversation. His figure instantly disappeared from the underground warehouse, leaving behind a dejected Fu Enji. After Wang Yi deduced the simplified cultivation techniques and copied them down, he did not inform Su Xia and the others. Instead, he directly appeared in Langya County City. In the Venerable Palace, Venerable Ning Jing read the 3 books in her hand, her eyes filled with shock. She had not personally deduced these techniques. Thus, unlike Wang Yi, who had created these techniques, it was impossible for her to know all the detailed information. However, with her venerable level vision, she could tell how precious these 3 cultivation techniques were. Putting away the books in her hand, Venerable Ning Jing couldn't help but praise Wang Yi. These techniques are indeed ingenious. They have the ability to change fate. Wang Yi was naturally happy to be praised. He pretended to be humble and said, "These cultivation techniques were simplified by me in the past few days." "Fellow Taoist Ning Jing, you flatter me." When Venerable Ning Jing heard this, she immediately lost her composure. What was fellow Taoist Wang talking about? Had he created these cultivation techniques in just a few days? What a joke. Those sect departments that specialized in researching cultivation techniques were useless in comparison. They could just eat shit. Every year, the sects would receive a massive amount of resources from China, but they could not produce any decent cultivation techniques. The results of more than 100 years could not compare to Wang Yi's results in just a few days. Retracting her thoughts, Venerable Ning Jing stopped thinking about those troublesome matters. She chuckled and asked, "Fellow Taoist Wang, are you planning to spread these cultivation techniques tomorrow?" Wang Yi shook his head slightly when he heard this, but he smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Ning Jing, are you willing to see the cultivation techniques I'm cultivating?" In any case, these cultivation techniques would start to spread on the short video platform tomorrow. Venerable Ning Jing naturally wouldn't refuse to come into contact with them in advance. She nodded slightly and smiled. "I couldn't ask for more." When Wang Yi saw this, he did not waste any time and pointed 2 fingers at Venerable Ning Jing's fair and smooth forehead. A wisp of spiritual power wrapped around the 3 cultivation techniques he was about to impart and directly surged into Venerable Ning Jing's spiritual space. Actually, this method was very dangerous. One had to know that the spiritual space was the place where a martial artists will gather. How could one allow others to enter their spiritual space at will? This was equivalent to putting one's life in the other party's hands. This is from the SoundStories Audiobook YouTube channel. If there was no absolute trust between the two, how could they dare to do this? However, Venerable Ning Jing seemed to have unparalleled trust in Wang Yi. Without any hesitation or dodging, Wang Yi's 2 fingers touched her forehead. Boom! Countless pieces of information instantly surged into Venerable Ning Jing's spiritual space. This was also because Venerable Ning Jing's strength had already reached the peak of the physical realm. Her spiritual power had already reached a terrifying level, be it in terms of quantity or quality. If it were anyone else, they would probably have been turned into idiots by this flood of information. As she carefully scanned through the cultivation technique that appeared in her spiritual space, Venerable Ning Jing's expression became more and more solemn. She finally understood why Wang Yi's combat strength was so heaven-defying. He was still at rank 9, but he was already comparable to a peak-level physical realm expert. Any one of these three divine techniques could allow a rank 9 being to have the ability to go against the conate realm, let alone have three divine techniques at the same time. At the same time, Venerable Ning Jing finally understood why Wang Yi had specially created the simplified cultivation techniques. It was because those three divine techniques were too heaven-defying and their requirements for a martial artist's strength were too high. The foundation necessary to cultivate these techniques was not something ordinary people could cultivate. As for these three simplified cultivation techniques, they were considered excessive. They provided the process of letting martial artists familiarize themselves with the cultivation strength of divine techniques. After a while, Venerable Ning Jing, who had figured out the connection, couldn't help but clap her hands and smile. Fellow Taoist Wang is a genius. I'm impressed. Wang Yi nodded slightly and did not continue on the topic. Instead, he and Venerable Ning Jing began to study the short videos that needed to be recorded. After all, tomorrow was the day that the smartphones and the short video platform would be released. Actually, this was very simple. Wang Yi only needed to record a video explaining the three simplified cultivation techniques and then explain the first few levels of the original divine techniques. Meanwhile, Venerable Ning Jing's mission was even simpler. She only needed to show her face and casually talk about her martial arts experience. The recording went smoothly. After handing everything over to Lu Yanyan, Wang Yi returned to his villa in Kang City through the spatial passageway. In the following period of time, Wang Yi's main goal was to find an opportunity to break through and raise all his cultivation techniques to level 13 and achieve perfection, thereby breaking through to the conate realm. Now, Wang Yi's attitude towards cultivation was no longer like that of Buddhists. He needed to race against time to increase his strength and strive to reach the so-called land immortal realm as soon as possible. At dawn the next day, the hands on the clock had just passed midnight, and the world was still completely dark. A long queue had already formed outside the guardians' residences of the various giant cities. Everyone appeared here at the same time, wanting to buy a smartphone immediately. They wanted to see the so-called short video platform for martial arts and meet the venerable who only existed in legends. After all, this was an officially promoted event. No one would doubt the authenticity of this matter. As time passed, more and more people gathered. By the time dawn broke, the entire Guardian's residence was already surrounded. Those who came later were dumbfounded to realize that there was no place for them to stand. In the end, they could only shake their heads and sigh helplessly, regretting that they did not go out earlier. As for the situation in Kang City, it was a little special. Countless powerful martial artists had come because of the Venerable Order, and it had already become extremely crowded outside the Guardian's residence. Today was also the last day of the 10-day agreement. Those who had comprehended the martial will from the Venerable Order naturally did not feel any psychological pressure. They could continue to comprehend in peace and deepen their gains. However, those who obtained nothing panicked. Their emotions began to become restless and violent, like gunpowder barrels that were about to explode. If not for the fact that they were suppressed by the words, "Stop it," a conflict would have already erupted. After all, this was a great opportunity to meet a venerable and cultivate a venerable level martial arts technique. No one could face this calmly. With the current situation, they naturally could no longer sell the smartphones at the Guardian's residence. After thinking about it, Fang Yuan personally decided to move it to the drill ground of the City Protection Army. This could be considered to have broken the rule that only the soldiers of the City Protection Army were allowed to enter the camp. However, there was no choice. They had to do something special during special times. Just as everyone's patience was about to run out and they were about to lose their patience, Fang Yuan and the city guard separated the crowd and came to the center of the drill ground. Looking around at the noisy crowd, Fang Yuan reached out and pressed down. Then, he said indifferently, "Silence." Perhaps it was because of the Guardian's authority, but as soon as his voice fell, the entire drill ground instantly fell silent. It was not an exaggeration to say that one could hear a pin drop. Fang Yuan nodded in satisfaction when he saw this. Then, he chuckled and said, I believe everyone is here to buy smartphones and listen to Lord Venerable's martial arts lecture. Everyone, remember to line up properly. Don't let any stampede happen. I won't waste any more time. The smartphone sale begins." At this point, Fang Yuan deliberately dragged his word before continuing. Each smartphone is priced at 100 yuan. Everyone is limited to buying one. Wang Yi was also not present. Otherwise, he would definitely give Fang Yuan a thumbs up. He did not expect this guy to have the potential to sell things. 100 yuan. Upon hearing the price of the smartphone, the surrounding crowd immediately exploded. If Fang Yuan had not said this, and if the Guardian's residence had not led this sale, everyone would probably think that this was a new type of scam. After all, ordinary cell phones cost thousands of yuan. In the end, the Guardian's residence spent so much money to promote the smartphone, but it only cost 100 yuan. This difference was indeed a little unexpected. The price was indeed not expensive. It could even be said to be frighteningly cheap. However, this was normal. Wang Yi was only doing this to spread his martial arts to the world, not to make a profit. Besides, the amount of yuan was just a number to him. It did not mean anything to him at all. Fang Yuan naturally knew what everyone was thinking, but he was not prepared to explain anything. He just casually waved to the back. The city guards, who were already prepared, carried huge black boxes to the center of the drill ground after seeing Fang Yuan's gesture. Fang Yuan opened a box and took out a smartphone. He held it quietly in his palm and swept his gaze across everyone, but he did not speak. As for the packaging, there was none at all. It was mainly because 10 days was too tight and there was really no time to produce such details. There was no lack of people who dared to try something new in any world. Someone in the crowd suddenly stood up and waved the $100 bills in his hand. He shouted, "Lord Guardian, I want to buy a smartphone." Seeing this, Fang Yuan took the money with a smile and personally handed the smartphone to the other party. To be honest, with Fang Yuan's status, there was no need for him to do this personally. He just wanted to make a good start. The herd mentality was effective. Seeing someone take the lead, the crowd was in chaos again. Everyone started to wave the banknotes in their hands and fight to buy smartphones. At this moment, Fang Yuan silently retreated to the side. His main purpose here was only to prevent any accidents from happening. The people who bought the smartphone could not wait to study it. After all, it was said that one would be able to listen to the Venerable's lecture on martial arts. It had smooth, perfect lines, and a completely black body that was filled with a metallic texture. The colorful screen occupied almost 80% of the phone. All of this was stimulating everyone's nerves. Compared to planet Earth, this batch of smartphones was only at the level of the first-generation phones in China. However, this was a direct leap from the blue screen era to the smart era after all. The impact was definitely unparalleled. The smartphone's functions were very simple as well. Other than the calling and messaging functions, there was only a martial arts icon on the huge screen. As for the other entertainment applications, they did not exist. It wasn't that Lu Yanyan could not do it, but there was no need to. After all, everything was for the sake of imparting martial arts. Wang Yi did not want the humans in this world to suffer the information explosion's impact and unnecessary temptation. Those who were curious would naturally have already clicked on the martial arts icon. There were only 2 short videos on it. One of the videos had a thumbnail of a young man with a flower phantom, while the other video showed a peerless woman in white standing in midair. Without any hesitation, they reached out and tapped the short video of the peerless woman in white on the screen. Boom! The sound of the hurricane tearing through the air came directly from the loudspeaker of the smartphone, instantly attracting the attention of everyone around. On the screen, Venerable Ning Jing stood in the air, with a long sword in her right hand and her left hand behind her back. The violent hurricane blew her beautiful hair and robe, making her look like a fairy that had descended from the heavens. She looked so extraordinary and otherworldly. The technique I just performed is called swimming butterfly. It's best at concealment and explosive power. The sword moves are sharp and unpredictable. It's a top-notch assassination sword technique. The moment she finished speaking, the long sword in Venerable Ning Jing's hand instantly danced. It was as difficult to track as an antelope's horn. It was like a bowstring that was taut to the extreme, ready to unleash a fatal blow at any moment. Everyone watched in fascination. When the short video ended, Venerable Ning Jing sheathed her sword and stood still. Everyone still felt a little unable to come back to their senses, as if they were dreaming and unable to break free. After an unknown period of time, Someone suddenly bowed toward Venerable Ning Jing on the screen and shouted respectfully, "Thank you, Venerable Ning Jing, for imparting your technique." Seeing this, everyone also bowed and said, "Thank you, Venerable Ning Jing, for imparting your technique." The scene was indeed spectacular. Countless people were worshipping the nearby smartphones with pious expressions. One could not help but feel touched by this scene. No one expected that the first short video would be so useful. Venerable Ning Jing directly taught them a top-notch assassination sword technique. Everyone could not help but look forward to the other short video. Without hesitation, they tapped their fingertips on the screen. Boom! At the same altitude, the moment the short video was played, the rumbling sound of a violent hurricane tearing through the air sounded. Wang Yi stood on the flower phantom in the sky with his hands behind his back and looked straight ahead. However, he did not directly deduce a battle technique like Venerable Ning Jing. Instead, he said indifferently, "My Tao is different from the cultivation techniques you cultivate. I have an independent martial arts system. Because the cultivation intensity is too high, it's impossible for people below the battle warrior rank to cultivate it directly. Therefore, I deduced simplified cultivation techniques corresponding to the original techniques. Only by cultivating the simplified cultivation techniques to perfection will you truly be qualified to cultivate my Tao." After saying that, Wang Yi began to move. He slowly displayed the 3 simplified 10 forms cultivation techniques and explained them at the same time. In order to let people see more clearly, Wang Yi's movements were very slow. When the audience saw this, they could not help but follow suit and move as well. Boom! Everyone present seemed to have turned into small vortexes that were crazily attracting and plundering the spiritual energy in the surroundings. Although it was not very strong, with so many people gathered together, the scene was still exceptionally spectacular. Boom! At this moment, someone in the crowd suddenly trembled slightly. His body immediately crackled and erupted with powerful physical strength. He actually broke through to the martial artist realm without any bottleneck as an ordinary person. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that I, Lan Mucheng, would have the chance to become a ranked martial artist in my lifetime. The person who had broken through to the 9-ranked system and was laughing wildly actually had silver hair and was at least 50 years old. No one had expected that the first person to obtain an opportunity from the smartphone would actually be an old man whose vitality had begun to decline. Someone in the crowd recognized Lan Mucheng and knew his background. He couldn't help but cup his fists and congratulate him. Brother Lan's years of persistent cultivation have not been wasted. Today, you received the opportunity to directly break through and step onto the path of martial arts. When everyone heard this, they came to a realization. It turned out that this silver-haired old man could still persist in cultivation and temper his body even after losing his chance to break through. Boom, boom, boom. Lan Mucheng had just broken through to the 9-ranked system when there was another commotion in the crowd. Immediately after, more people successfully broke through to the 9-ranked system. Without exception, these people were already past the best age to break through, but they persisted in cultivating all year round and constantly polished and refined their bodies. They were only a step away from advancing. Upon seeing this, Fang Yuan still maintained his smile and was not surprised. After all, this cultivation technique was produced by Wang Yi. It was normal for these techniques to provide such a terrifying breakthrough effect. He could easily accept it even if it was more exaggerated. It was almost noon. After Fang Yuan instructed his deputy in a low voice to maintain order and not cause any trouble, he quietly left the crowded drill ground while everyone's attention was on the short videos. Once noon struck, the 10-day agreement would expire. Fang Yuan needed to go to the Department of Finance, the martial arts stage, and outside the Guardian's residence to receive the lucky people who had comprehended the Venerable's martial will. Yes, the lucky ones. They had the opportunity to contribute to the Venerable's plan of teaching martial arts. They could also cultivate Venerable-level martial arts and listen to the Venerable's personal lecture. If they weren't lucky, what were they? Fang Yuan's figure kept wandering in Kang City as he put away the venerable orders floating in the air. The people who had comprehended a wisp of the martial will were naturally excited and left with Fang Yuan happily. Meanwhile, those who did not gain anything could only beat their chests in regret. They hated themselves for missing such a huge opportunity, as they lacked comprehension. Of course, they did not dare to cause trouble because they were unhappy. After all, this was Kang City, and Venerable Jinlin Guoshi had ordered them to stop fighting. When Fang Yuan appeared outside the Guardian's residence, there were already nearly 100 people following behind him. All of them had a faintly powerful aura. There were only more than 100 of them, but they actually walked out with the momentum of thousands of troops on the battlefield. What surprised Fang Yuan was that among the experts comprehending the venerable order outside the Guardian's residence, nearly 200 people had comprehended a wisp of the martial will. This was a little scary. The number of people who had comprehended the martial will here was more than double that of the other two places combined. After Fang Yuan put away the last venerable order in the sky, he directly led the 300 or so people towards the Guardian's residence. After all, there were too many people. Wang Yi's small villa might not be able to accommodate 300 people. However, before Fang Yuan left, he did not forget about the experts who had gained nothing. Fortunately, he was already prepared and got his subordinates to give each of them a smartphone. It was said that Venerable Ning Jing and Venerable Jinling Guoshi would teach their martial arts through the short video platform. Everyone was naturally skeptical at first, but after someone pointed out the two short videos, no one doubted the authenticity of the matter anymore. In the end, everyone thanked Fang Yuan in unison and accepted the smartphones, tacitly acknowledging this kindness. Of course, this was definitely free. It was treated as a gift from the Guardian's residence, and could also allow them to form a good relationship with this group of experts. In the main hall of the Guardian's residence, Wang Yi stood in the main hall while Fang Yuan and the others, who were regarded as the core members of the team and the prototypes, stood behind him. Although the Guardian's residence was large, the space in the main hall was limited. Other than a few rank 9 Grandmasters and more than 10 Grandmasters, the others could only stand in the courtyard outside the hall. Even so, everyone was still extremely excited. After all, this was a meeting with a venerable. However, when everyone saw Wang Yi's face clearly, their eyes instantly widened in disbelief. He was so young. The first impression that Wang Yi gave everyone was that he was young. Unlike those who had achieved success in martial arts, his youth was brought out by his temperament. To put it bluntly, although Wang Yi looked high and mighty and was so indifferent to everything, he had the childishness of a young man and a trace of immaturity. Still, it couldn't be helped. After all, with Wang Yi's age in his previous life and the 20 or so years' worth of life experiences he had inherited from the previous owner of his body, he was only in his early 50s at most. Moreover, this was not how things were calculated. Wang Yi looked young and did not emit any powerful pressure. He was no different from an ordinary young man. However, no one dared to underestimate him, especially the rank 9 Grandmasters. They could not sense the aura of a powerhouse from Wang Yi, but they could still vaguely sense the strength of the beautiful woman standing behind him. She had definitely surpassed the peak of rank 9. As for whether she had completed several qualitative changes in strength and reached the peak realm, they could not determine it. Without any hesitation, everyone immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, Lord Venerable Jinling Guoshi." Wang Yi nodded slightly and said with a faint smile, "Everyone, there's no need to be so polite." Then, his gaze swept across everyone present and finally landed on the dozen or so experts in the main hall. What surprised Wang Yi was that these Grandmaster realm experts were all unfamiliar faces. When he reforged the weapons that day, these people were definitely not on the battlefield. However, his doubts did not last long. Wang Yi understood what was going on. This was the difference between an official force and a civilian force. It had to be known that not all experts were willing to join the government. When the human race was in trouble, they would step forward, but they were unwilling to be restrained by the rules. It was obvious that the Grandmasters that Venerable Ning Jing had gathered that day were all from the government, while these people belonged to the commoners. They were existences similar to rangers. However, this was also quite good. He would feel more comfortable with activating them for battle. When they were activated, it would not cause any pressure on the defense of the giant human cities in the Langyu domain. Without thinking about anything else, Wang Yi continued with a smile, "Since you've comprehended the wisp of martial will that I left behind, I'll naturally teach you supreme techniques as I said." However, everyone was abnormally excited when they heard this, but they suddenly shuddered at the word, "however." Seeing everyone's different expressions, Wang Yi couldn't help but chuckle. However, he didn't keep them in suspense and said directly, "However, I have something I need you to do." Everyone heaved a long sigh of relief when they heard that. That was normal. If they wanted something, they had to give something in return. That was human nature. At this moment, someone suddenly stood up in the hall. He cupped his fists and said, "Please instruct us, Lord Venerable. We will die for you." Fang Yuan could not help but raise his eyebrows when he saw the person who spoke. A smile appeared on his lips. It turned out that this person was an acquaintance. He was Yi Kai. He was the first person who had comprehended the invincible Vajra will from the Venerable Order and condensed the invincible Vajra shield. With the strength of a peak rank 8 Grand Master, he could withstand the attack of a top Grand Master. Upon hearing this, Wang Yi smiled faintly and said, "Everyone, you're being too serious. It's just a small matter." After saying that, he waved his hand behind him. Fang Yuan immediately understood when he saw this. He took a few steps forward and cupped his fists at everyone. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone's gazes instantly gathered on Fang Yuan. Seeing this, Fang Yuan did not hesitate and directly told everyone about Wang Yi's plan to spread martial arts to the world. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Whether it was in the hall or in the courtyard, a series of gasps instantly resounded. Everyone was shocked speechless by Wang Yi's grand plan, and by his vision and heart. At the same time, they were also convinced. It took a long time for everyone to recover and slowly digest this shocking news. There was nothing impressive about it. Everyone bowed respectfully to Wang Yi again and said, "Lord Venerable, you're right. This is beneficial to the country and the people. We're willing to die for you." Not everyone could be so selfless, but that did not stop them from admiring such a person. Wang Yi nodded in satisfaction when he saw this. However, he still reminded them, "I already know your intentions, but there are still some things that need to be made clear in advance. After you learn my techniques, you'll definitely have a hard time. You'll have to travel to the various giant cities all year round and help me teach the world. Second, we need to fight for the human race. Anyone who cultivates my techniques must fight bravely against the foreign races and not retreat for the race." Before Wang Yi could continue, someone suddenly said, "Lord Venerable, don't worry. Even without the Venerable's techniques, we are willing to fight to the death for our race." Everyone's emotions seemed to resonate with this person's words. They instantly shouted crazily, "We will fight to the death. We will fight to the death. We will fight to the death." Ellipsis. This was what they were thinking. They might not be part of the government, and they might only belong to the civilian rangers, but they never lacked the determination to fight to the death for the human race. This was also a common problem among humans in this world. Regardless of whether they were loyal or malicious, good or evil, selfish or compassionate, even those who were heinous would step forward and fight to the death when faced with the survival of their race. The stronger the human race was, the more courageous they would be when fighting against foreign races. They would use their lives to fight for the future of their race. Wang Yi could not help but be slightly moved when he saw this. Then, he felt relieved. Perhaps this was why humans were called humans. When the surging emotions slowly subsided, everyone realized that the one standing before them was the Lord Venerable. They actually interrupted the Lord Venerable's speech without regard for his status and even lost their composure in front of him by shouting so loud. Only then did everyone realize that they had caused trouble. They immediately felt a lingering fear, and could not help but shrink their necks and subconsciously take a few steps back. Wang Yi did not show any signs of displeasure or anger towards this. Instead, he admired this group of humans even more. The smile on his face couldn't help but widen as he continued, "As for the third reason, I naturally won't let everyone work for nothing. I'll be in charge of providing all the cultivation resources you need. In my free time, I'll also give lectures on martial arts and answer the difficult questions you have faced in your cultivation." This bit of resources was really not difficult for Wang Yi to obtain, let alone provide for these people's daily consumption. Even if the number of people increased by several times, he could easily afford it. Besides, if it really didn't work out, he could just ask Venerable Ning Jing for help. After all, Langya County City's treasury was very rich. As soon as Wang Yi finished speaking, the scene instantly fell silent. Everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief. They never expected that not only did the Venerable not punish them for their offense, but he even promised them a huge reward. Was this a bluff? In either case, no one was worried about this. How ridiculous. What was the status of a Venerable? He was a being whose words carried weight. Every word and action from him represented the law and reason of the world. To put it bluntly, the combined weight of these people wasn't enough to make a Venerable go back on his word. If he wanted these people to learn martial arts, the first requirement was to let them learn those divine techniques. However, because he had previously condensed the special Tao comprehension space, Wang Yi had once again lost control of the power of the world. Therefore, he could only settle for the next best thing and use some other stupid methods. "The hall is narrow and can't fit everyone. Why don't you follow me to the courtyard? After saying that, Wang Yi took a step forward and walked out. No one had any objections to this and followed behind him. Besides, what was the point of having an opinion? Would anyone dare to raise it? In the courtyard, Wang Yi was still standing in the middle. He swept his gaze across everyone and saw that they were all looking impatient. He stopped dragging and said loudly, "Everyone, look." And with that, Wang Yi shook his body and 3 types of power instantly surged out of his body, condensing into 3 phantoms in the void. Wang Yi's idea was actually very simple. Since he could no longer use the special Dao comprehension space, he might as well directly demonstrate the 3 divine techniques to everyone. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, the 3 phantoms floating in the void instantly moved. The crimson phantom formed hand seals with both hands, and its body immediately became transparent. Countless meridians and acupoints appeared in front of everyone. Roar. The roars of dragons and elephants sounded from the red shadow's body. With the guidance of the hand seals, endless power surged out of the void in a violent and terrifying wave before being directly sucked into the crimson phantom's body. Level 1 of the Dragon Elephant Wisdom technique automatically circulated, and the meridians and acupoints of the crimson phantom lit up one after another. The detailed circulation route and trajectory of the cultivation technique were presented to everyone. Wang Yi did not stay idle either. He continued to explain and answer everyone's questions. As for the other 2 phantoms, they did the same thing. They also became transparent, revealing their meridians and acupoints. The purple phantom circulated the 9 suns divine technique, and a vast sun faintly appeared in the void. As its meridians and acupoints flickered, the circulation route and trajectory of the cultivation technique were immediately revealed. As for the golden phantom, it was circulating the little leaf flying dagger technique. Above its head, there seemed to be the phenomenon of flying daggers. Its meridians and acupoints seemed to be circulating with saber chi. This strongest offensive technique was for others to observe and comprehend. As time passed, the cultivation levels of the 3 transparent phantoms gradually increased, and their auras became more and more terrifying. The cultivation technique reached level 1, and their martial arts realm reached rank -1. The cultivation technique reached level 2, and their martial arts realm reached rank 2. Ellipsis. The cultivation technique reached level 13, and their martial arts realm reached the peak of rank 9. Their combat strength became comparable to a conate venerable. This was the best Wang Yi could do without affecting his combat strength. Even so, these 3 phantoms could not stay in the world for long. After their power was exhausted, they would completely dissipate. The 3 terrifying figures were like the bright moon and stars, facing one another in the void and reflecting each other as if some mysterious power was being derived. Wang Yi frowned. He seemed to have vaguely seen an opportunity for a breakthrough. However, this feeling was very vague. It was like the reflection of a flower in the mirror or the moon in the water. It was impossible to completely grasp it. Meanwhile, everyone was mesmerized as if they were in a dream or an epiphany. Their eyes were unfocused. They seemed to have personally witnessed the lives of the 3 supreme experts. They saw how these experts rose to prominence and roared proudly in the heavens. The heaven-defyingly powerful divine techniques seemed to have been deeply engraved in their minds, forming cultivation memories that they would never forget. Everything was proving to everyone that this was not an illusion or a dream. This great opportunity that was enough to defy the heavens and change fate had really smashed onto their heads. Time passed slowly, and everyone woke up from that special state. Seeing this, Wang Yi's smile did not change. He asked again, "How do you feel?" When they heard the voice, everyone came back to their senses and bowed to Wang Yi in unison. "We are willing to be martial artist teachers and teach the world for the Lord Venerable." When Wang Yi heard this, his emotions seemed to be stirred up. He immediately clapped his hands and laughed. "Good, good, good. What good martial arts teachers. Today, I will establish the organization of martial arts teachers in the name of the Venerable. All of you are core members of the organization. In the future, for the country to be prosperous and the people to be at peace, you have to spread your martial arts to the world. If the foreign races attack in the future, you must bravely kill the enemy and resist thieves outside the country." As soon as he finished speaking, the scene instantly boiled over. Everyone revealed excited expressions. Moreover, they could not help but be moved. In public, what they would do in the future was an important thing that would benefit the country and the people. It would be remembered in history. In private, they had joined a martial organization established by a venerable and became the trusted aides of a venerable. Whether it was for public or private reasons, no one would be able to resist such temptation. After the cheering ended and everyone calmed down, they replied in unison, "We will obey your orders." Then, everyone's expressions turned solemn as they bowed respectfully again. "Greetings, leader." Hearing the term, leader, the corners of Wang Yi's mouth could not help but twitch. This did not make him sound like a good person. Fortunately, he simply had the title of leader in the organization. He would still have Fang Yuan and the others handle specific matters. As for the errands, they would be done by hundreds of people. The important matters and the general direction had been decided. Next, they needed to discuss the organization's internal structure, the division of duties, and some details. In order to completely grasp that mysterious opportunity, Wang Yi naturally had no interest in these, nor did he have time to waste on such trivial matters. Moreover, Wang Yi also believed that Fang Yuan and the others could handle everything well. Therefore, after leaving behind a huge amount of resources, he disappeared from the Guardian's residence and returned to his villa to enter seclusion. As civilian rangers and itinerant cultivators, no one present was stupid considering their achievements. Naturally, they could clearly see the relationship between the Venerable and the other people, including Fang Yuan. At the same time, they could also distinguish the distance between them. Although the Venerable also paid attention to them, their statuses were worlds apart from Fang Yuan and the others. Therefore, when discussing the matters of the organization, Fang Yuan and the others were basically the leaders. A few rank 9 grandmasters were supporting them, while the other dozen or so grandmasters occasionally gave suggestions. As for those below the grandmaster realm, they basically did not even have the chance to interrupt. In a quiet room of the villa, Wang Yi sat cross-legged, his brows tightly furrowed. The aura around him was also slightly chaotic. It had been 5 days. Ever since he returned from the Guardian's residence that day, he had been in seclusion for 5 days. However, in these 5 days, he was actually unable to grasp the vague opportunity to break through. Wang Yi even suspected that he was hallucinating that day. That might not even be an opportunity to break through at all. It might just be an inner demon that he had developed recently due to his impatience, or a sign of the legendary Qi deviation. This gave Wang Yi a fright. He hurriedly checked his condition in detail from the inside out. However, after checking several times, he did not find anything wrong. His body was spotless, his mind was flawless, and his true Qi was pure. In the end, Wang Yi could only attribute the reason to the fact that the opportunity had not arrived yet. It was not the best time for him to advance to the Conate realm yet. Since that was the case, Wang Yi could not be bothered to waste any more time in the quiet room. He took a step forward and instantly disappeared. The next moment, Wang Yi appeared in the hall. However, before he could stabilize himself, Su Xia and Hua Chengyan also appeared in the hall holding each other's arms. From the looks of it, the two of them were preparing to leave the house. Furthermore, Hua Chengqing was holding a gilded invitation. Looking carefully, this was actually sent by Jia Shi that day. Clearly, the two of them were preparing to attend the auction held by the Yonghua Chamber of Commerce. Meanwhile, Su Xia did not expect Wang Yi, who had been in seclusion for a few days, to come out today. Looking at the familiar man in front of her, a smile bloomed on her face as she hurriedly walked up to him. As the saying went, absence makes the heart grow fonder. After 5 days of seclusion, Wang Yi realized that he missed the beauty in front of him even more. He walked up to her without any hesitation or delay. Ignoring the third wheel beside him, he simply pulled Su Xia into his arms. Upon seeing this, Su Xia did not resist. She even rested her head on Wang Yi's shoulder. However, when she saw Hua Chengyan from the corner of her eye, her face couldn't help but turn red. Meanwhile, Hua Chengyan was very observant. Seeing the two of them like this, she didn't say anything and gently retreated upstairs. After a moment of affection, Su Xia reluctantly left Wang Yi's arms. Her face was still red as she turned around and ran upstairs. Click, click. Not long after, there was a commotion at the stairs. Then, Su Xia walked down with Hua Chengyan again. In the hall, the three of them sat opposite each other. Wang Yi glanced at the gilded invitation card in Hua Chengyan's hand and couldn't help but smile. Are you two preparing to attend the auction? Su Xia nodded repeatedly when she heard this. Coincidentally, the Taoist temple was on vacation today. Seeing that Wang Yi was still not out of seclusion, she prepared to go to the auction with Hua Chengyan to broaden her horizons. However, to everyone's surprise, before the two of them could leave, they bumped into Wang Yi, who had just come out of seclusion. Originally, Wang Yi wanted to go out for a walk because he had failed to break through. Seeing Su Xia nod, he smiled and said, "Since I have nothing to do, I'll go with you." Su Xia was overjoyed when she heard this and reached out to hold Wang Yi's arm. However, she still asked curiously, "Yi, did your seclusion go smoothly?" Upon hearing that, Wang Yi could not help but recall his experiences over the past few days. The corners of his mouth twitched uncontrollably. However, in order not to worry Su Xia, Wang Yi scratched her nose and said confidently, "Of course, it went smoothly, don't worry." Seeing that Wang Yi did not seem to have any problems, Su Xia heaved a sigh of relief. Su Xia's concern was understandable since she rarely saw Wang Yi in seclusion after discovering that he was a cultivator and a powerful martial artist beyond the Grandmaster realm. Moreover, even if Wang Yi went into seclusion, it would only take a day or two at most. Basically, he would come out of seclusion after Su Xia returned home from the Taoist temple. There would not be a situation where she would not be able to see him for a few days. Therefore, when Wang Yi went into seclusion this time and did not come out for 5 days, it was inevitable that Su Xia would be worried. Moreover, Wang Yi had already informed them in advance. Su Xia would probably have been waiting outside the quiet room all day long while being worried sick. She wouldn't have even brought Hua Changyan to the auction. On the street, Wang Yi and Su Xia chatted and laughed as they walked side by side. Meanwhile, Hua Changyan consciously slowed down and followed behind the two of them. If Wang Yi were to wave a folding fan in his hand at this moment, it would give people the feeling that he was a rich playboy shopping aimlessly with his wife and Mai Dervant. In Kang City, powerful martial artists could still be seen everywhere. They did not leave just because the comprehension of the Venerable Order had ended. After all, there were only a few experts who were lucky enough to comprehend a wisp of martial will and join the organization of martial arts teachers. Most of them had already missed the heavenly opportunity to comprehend the Venerable Order and gained nothing from this trip. Naturally, they would not miss the auction again. Unfortunately, there was only one piece of the green jade rock marrow. Many people were destined to return in disappointment. Only after the auction ended and the experts gradually left could Kang City return to its usual calm state. In just half a day, smartphones had already become popular in the entire Langya domain. Everyone had already seen Jinlin Guoshi stepping on a flower phantom and preaching his 3 simplified cultivation techniques. Everyone knew about Wang Yi's appearance. As he walked on the streets, there were always people bowing to him from afar. However, to Wang Yi's relief, they only stopped at bowing. They were not as fanatical as those fans on planet Earth. But even so, Wang Yi still couldn't stand it. In the end, he had no choice but to use his spiritual power to cover his face. Only then did he feel smug and peaceful. At this moment, the flow of people in the Yonghua Chamber of Commerce had reached a terrifying level. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as crowded. If not for the fact that a yellow-robed figure, who was sitting cross-legged at the entrance and faintly emitting a peak realm aura, was too terrifying and powerful, this place would have long been in chaos. After all, everyone here was strong and unruly. The Yonghua Chamber of Commerce was not qualified to make them line up obediently. Wang Yi stepped forward and handed the gilded invitation to the attendant in front of him. He casually glanced at the yellow-robed figure and could not help but raise his eyebrows. What a familiar aura! He actually sensed a trace of the Dragon Elephant Wisdom technique on the other party, and their cultivation technique level was not very low. This was going to be interesting. It had to be known that he had only just spread the 10 forms of Dragon Elephant. Although the original cultivation technique had been recorded, it had not been uploaded to the short video platform. Under such circumstances, it was obvious that it was abnormal for this person to have reached such a high cultivation level in this technique. At the thought of this, Wang Yi's lips curled up into a strange smile. This world was getting more and more interesting. The attendant took the invitation and bowed slightly. His expression immediately became extremely respectful. He could naturally recognize that the gilded invitation card represented the highest standard. It represented the most distinguished guests invited by the Yonghua Chamber of Commerce. The attendant ignored the other guests who were participating in the auction. He turned around and led the 3 of them into the Chamber of Commerce. Wang Yi's gaze swept across the yellow-robed figure again. After memorizing his aura, he retracted his attention. After all, he had gone out with Su Xia mainly to relax and eliminate the negative emotions caused by his seclusion. It was similar to what Wang Yi had imagined. The auction venue was very similar to the one in Planet Earth's movies. A circular stage was set up in the center of the venue. There was no one on it, but the auctioneer would probably stand there to preside over the auction after it began. Below the stage were densely packed seats. At this moment, they were already filled with countless powerful martial artists. The attendant led the three of them through the crowd and headed straight for the second floor. The gilded invitation made them eligible to enter a private room. Beep. The attendant swiped his card and opened the door of the private room. Then, he bowed slightly and said, "Sir, this is your private room. If there's anything, you can call us through the bell in the private room." Wang Yi nodded slightly. Then, he casually took out a few hundred yuan bills and handed them to the attendant. He chuckled and said, "You've worked hard." The attendant took the money and was overjoyed. He bowed again and thanked him. "Thank you, sir. I hope that sir returns with a full load this time. You can bid for the items that you like." Actually, it was no wonder that the attendant was so excited. Usually, VIP guests like Wang Yi would tip. However, most of them would just give a few dozen yuan as a token of appreciation. Very few of them would give tips that exceeded 100 yuan. As for those who were as generous as Wang Yi, whose tips consisted of several bills, they were rarely seen. Even though the attendant didn't count how much Wang Yi had given in detail, he estimated from the thickness of the bills that there was at least 700 to 800 yuan. This was already worth half a month of his salary. Wang Yi wrapped his arm around Su Xia's slender waist and walked side by side into the private room. Hua Changyan continued to follow behind the two of them. Seeing this, the attendant tactfully closed the door and gently retreated from the second floor. It wasn't until he retreated to the hall on the first floor that the attendant turned around in confusion. In just a few minutes, he could no longer remember the appearance of that gentleman. In fact, the other party's figure was still fading in his mind as if he had never seen him at all. The private room was well decorated, with a soft blanket on the floor and a sofa placed in the middle. There was a perfect view of the auction stage below through the bright French windows. Meanwhile, the coffee table was filled with all kinds of spiritual fruits and snacks. The display rack in the corner was also filled with wine. It could be seen that the owner was very attentive. Wang Yi stood in front of the French windows and swept his gaze across the auction stage and the chaotic crowd below. Although he was only a floor higher, he really felt like he was at the top of the world, looking down at the awe-inspiring view below. It was no wonder that people pursued wealth, power, and strength. Possessing them really did feel good. Meanwhile, in the spacious underground warehouse of the Yonghua China Chamber of Commerce, it became extremely crowded because of the hundreds of people gathered there. If outsiders saw this scene, they would definitely be scared to death. There were hundreds of people present, and none of them were below the Grandmaster realm. There were even more than 10 peak realm experts. As for ordinary rank 9 Grandmasters, they made up more than half of the people present. Lord Wuqing sat on the main seat. Only peak realm beings were qualified to sit on both sides of him. Looking around, Lord Wuqing said indifferently, "How's the arrangement of the altar?" The moment Lord Wuqing finished speaking, a peak realm being at the side said, "Sir, we've already set up martial immortal blood crystals at the various nodes of Kang City according to the locations of the altar. As long as you give the order, we can activate all the human experts in the sacrificial altar and guide the experts of our race to descend. From then on, this world will completely become our race's resource land." Upon hearing this, Lord Wuqing nodded slightly and said with a faint smile, "That's good." However, just in case, he couldn't help but remind the peak realm expert. "Everyone, don't forget that to allow us to descend into this world, our race started a war in the blood-red plains with the ugly Yong God race. Several true immortal realm experts died because of this. As for the experts below the true immortal realm, there are already countless deaths. If the grand plan of our race is ruined because of our negligence, we won't be able to escape the blame even if we die 10,000 times. Our race will even be implicated and bear our sins." The moment Lord Wuqing finished speaking, the peak realm experts at the top and the ordinary Grandmaster realm experts below immediately stood upright and replied in unison, "Don't worry, sir. Even if we die 10,000 times, we won't ruin our race's grand plan. No one can stop our descent." Seeing this, Lord Wuqing said confidently, "Everyone, go to the various nodes and wait for the time being. When the auction begins, immediately activate the altar and sacrifice the living beings in the entire city. After the matter is completed, our race will successfully descend into this world. You will be known for your outstanding service and become the heroes of our race. I will also reward you." Everyone agreed in unison upon hearing this. Then, their figures disappeared from the spot, and the underground warehouse became empty again. This was also because Wang Yi liked living a normal life and was unwilling to keep his spiritual perception activated. Otherwise, he would have sensed so many experts gathered in the underground warehouse long ago. If that were the case, they would have probably been wiped out by Wang Yi the moment they gathered, let alone be able to carry out the plan to activate the altar and sacrifice tens of millions of living beings. It was only at this moment that Fu Enji's dispirited expression was revealed in the corner. Lord Wuqing did not prevent Fu Enji from listening to them at all. Rather, he deliberately let him hear their previous conversation. Fu Enji naturally heard everyone's conversation, but the more he listened, the colder and more desperate his heart became. Fate was really unpredictable. 30 years ago, after Fu Enji's wife handed that thing to him when she died, he was targeted by that good brother in Tantra City. At the same time, Lord Wuqing also came to his door and promised that as long as he took out that thing, Lord Wuqing would revive his wife. Of course, for Fu Enji to have such a family business, he was naturally not easy to deal with when he was young. How could he believe something as unbelievable as bringing someone back to life without seeing concrete evidence? This was until Lord Wuqing used all kinds of unbelievable and magical methods. After that, no matter how unbelievable it was, he could only choose to believe it. This put Fu Enji in a dilemma. On the one hand, his wife had instructed him not to hand over the item no matter what. On the other hand, the people who coveted this thing were too strong. Be it his peak realm, good brother, or Lord Wuqing who could revive the dead, they were not beings he could afford to offend. Although he wasn't sure what was so special about that item, Fu Enji naturally couldn't be indifferent to the temptation of reviving his wife. Actually, at that time, Fu Enji also had a plan. Since he could not afford to offend either of the two forces, he thought that he might as well pull in another force and wander between the three forces. He would completely cause confusion and see if he could take this opportunity to benefit from this chaos. Not only could he keep what he had, but he could also revive his wife. Unfortunately, at that time, the Yonghua Chamber of Commerce was only beginning to take shape. Apart from those two people, the thing left behind by his wife could not move other experts at all. It could be said that at that time, Fu Enji did not have any bargaining chips in his hands, nor could he pull in a third party. In the end, he could only give up on the plan helplessly. But who would have thought that after 30 years, Fu Enji would finally see hope? After obtaining the green jade rock marrow and having the capital to continue carrying out his plan, fate played a huge joke on him. Lord Wuqing did not play by the rules at all. The plan had just begun, and the situation was still calm, but he had already turned hostile and imprisoned Fu Enji. More importantly, Lord Wuqing wasn't even a human at all. He had coveted the thing so that he could sacrifice the lives of millions of living beings. Then, he would activate the so-called altar and guide the foreign race to descend into this world. At this moment, Fu Enji finally understood his wife's dying words, and he finally knew how much trouble he had caused. It could be said that it was because of his selfishness that Kang City was now in an unknown danger zone. In fact, even the entire human race was in danger. Fu Enji no longer cared about his life and death. As for reviving his wife, he had completely given up. He could only hope that the few trump cards he had left behind would be useful. With his own death at the end of the story, he must not involve Kang City or even the entire human race. Lord Wuqing casually played with a scarlet crystal-like round crystal in his hand. There were dense patterns engraved on it, making it look extremely mysterious and profound. The primary upload of this chapter happened on N0 to Vel BJN. Lord Wuqing's gaze swept across Fu Enji, who had already become a prisoner. His eyes were filled with mockery, bloodlust, and even a hint of madness. After a while, he finally said mockingly, "Don't worry, I won't kill you. I want you to see with your own eyes how that bitch Wu Jiao is revived and how she accepts the judgment of the race. I want you to watch how that bitch is tortured, and how she will fall into eternal damnation and suffer the pain of being burned by the flames of sin." At this point, Lord Wuqing's eyes instantly turned scarlet, and his expression was completely distorted. He even felt like he was about to go crazy. No one knew whether he was still targeting Fu Enji, or if this was just him venting his anger. Lord Wuqing roared crazily, "Bitch! Bitch! Bitch! Which part of this trash is better than me? He actually charmed you. He charmed you to the point that you didn't hesitate to destroy your future, give up your noble status, give up the chance to change the fate of your race, and even give up your life to protect this piece of trash. Wait till next part.